So we're going to talk about map voting in Overwatch, relatively new system that I think people have kind of ironed some of the kinks out about how to utilize it. But I do think that a lot of people don't really know how to utilize it competitively effectively, especially when you're trying to work your hero pool into it. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to talk a little bit about how to map vote effectively depending on your hero pool. And we're going to be crucially ignoring a couple of factors here, but three main factors we are going to be looking at. First one is going to be the breadth of the map, like how broad, how wide, how flanky the map is. The second one, we're going to be looking at verticality, in other words, how much high ground, how little high ground, keeping in mind that we will be grading these things. And the third one is essentially how compressed the map. That's not what we talked about at all. That's not the third thing. I literally just said that. The third thing we're going to be talking about is how long the sightlines are on the map. So essentially how good are ranged characters, how bad are ranged characters on the map. So again, it's really just the three dimensions. It's breadth, it's height, and it's width. And really, as simple as that sounds, being able to kind of analyze the map off of those parameters can really help you decide what heroes to play on the map. Now, crucially, I'm not going to be paying attention whatsoever to meta, like what characters are strong right now. Like, I'm not going to be like, don't play this character because he's weak. If it fits for the map, play it. Because this needs to be evergreen regardless of meta. And I'm also going to encourage you guys to stick within your hero pool. Like if you have an optimal hero pool, you kind of want to play heroes that fit your hero pool first. Like you don't want to be playing Widow on a good Widow map if you don't play Widow, right? So I'm just going to kind of give you guys some general guidelines, general guidance of what are the best heroes, the best situations. And encouraging you to vote for these maps when you're given the opportunity to. This isn't going to boost you from platinum to masters, but maybe it will boost you a tier or two, right? But also it's actually important that you understand these things here. So even if the map voting doesn't necessarily change the way that you see Overwatch in terms of just gaining SR right now, it is important and it's one of the factors to consider when you're trying to position effectively on maps. So let's say I'm playing Soldier on Havana. That's a bad map for Soldier. We'll talk about why later. But if you're stuck on Havana, then you need to be thinking, okay, well, how can I find a way to play Soldier on Havana? How can I squeeze my strengths out? So we kind of have to approach things not just from a short-term game, but also a long-term game. And I think talking about map voting does that a lot. Now, as I said, the three parameters are going to be width, length, and height. And we're going to be talking about how those characters and which characters do well in those parameters. And we're going to be kind of combining everything into a big clump. We're going to be removing a little bit of nuance here. I'm glad we're starting with King of the Hill because Busan is a great example of a map that generally is pretty broad for a King of the Hill map, generally has a lot of longer sight lines, especially compared to other King of the Hill maps. But let's say if I were to say Junkrat isn't amazing on this point because it's a little bit too broad for Junkrat. That might be kind of true, mostly true, partly true. But then if you get Junkrat here on defense and they're trying to walk through a choke and nobody's taking an off angle, Junkrat's amazing. Maybe the best character in the game here. So all of this is done with you can play the character on the map. You just have to understand that there are going to be other characters that might do a little bit better. So what I'm going to do here is, this is going to be a little bit clunky, but I'm going to kind of go through each map and grade it on each scale. We're going to start with length, then we're going to talk about verticality, and then we're going to talk about breadth, and then I'm going to give you guys some examples of characters that are going to do well here. Now, I'm not going to go through every single character, so this is going to be reliant off of you understanding your character. So if you think that Soldier 76 is a really good sniper, you're gonna draw the wrong conclusions here. If you think that Reaper is really, really good on long sight lines, or if you think Wrecking Ball is really bad on broad maps, your preconceived notions about your character are going to lead you to some wrong conclusions here. And sadly, there just isn't a good time to really... I can't do both maps and heroes, so we have to choose one. I might talk about some misconceptions, but for the most part, this is going to rely off of you actually knowing what kind of space that your character likes, okay? Okay, so first things first, we'll talk about Busan. As I said, in terms of, we'll talk about the sight lines. I would give this one, 1 out of 5 stars. I give this one like a 3, maybe a 4 in terms of sight lines, in terms of you're going to like ranged characters here, especially compared to other King of the Hill game modes. Range is really, really good here. It's probably the best sniper King of the Hill map. That being said, it's not going to be as good as Circuit. So if you play longer sightline characters, this is going to be the King of the Hill that you want. In terms of the verticality, it's decent here, but it's not great. So if you're talking about characters like Winston, if you are talking about characters like Reaper, anything that utilizes a lot of verticality, even a character like Mercy, those are characters that, like, if they like the long sight lines, Mercy's pretty good with long sight lines, that's fine, but you're not going to be really utilizing your verticality as much on any of the 3 points here. This one is probably your best verticality map, but if we take a look at Sanctuary, I'm not going to go through every King of the Hill point. Maybe I should, actually. Maybe I should. just briefly. But yeah, there's not, the verticality on Busan is not great. It's okay at points, but it's not super good. So heroes that are super reliant off of verticality may have mixed success here. And that's often going to be the case with a lot of the King of the Hill maps. We'll keep going here. This is obviously your other point here. And then in terms of breadth, okay, and by breadth, I mean how wide the map is. And this is something that's very favorable for fast heroes, for flankers. Anything that has a lot of mobility and a lot of speed, because it allows them to set really wide angles, then you're going to have a pretty good time in Busan. So in terms of breadth, we said about 3.5 stars for length. I would give it about 2 stars in verticality, and I'd give it about 3.5 stars in terms of breadth. This map right here is like a Sombra Wrecking Ball Soldier 76's dream. There's just so much breadth here. Speed is so valuable here. So if you have mobility and you have a bit of range or a way of closing the gap, this map in particular is phenomenal. Would I rather play Sojourn or Soldier in Busan? Depends on the point. This point, you might have an easier time with Soldier. Again, ignoring meta, ignoring how strong the characters are, just in a vacuum. Soldier has more repositioning options here than Sojourn, but the sightlines here are really good for Sojourn. So I think really Sojourn and Soldier are both good on this map because there's enough breadth for Soldier, there's enough sightlines for Sojourn, but definitely more of a sniper-oriented map or one that rewards heavy flankers. So again, I would say this one in terms of verticality, a 2. Characters that are very reliant on verticality, not going to love Busan. Characters that love longer sightlines, characters that love deeper flanks. This is going to be a lot more appropriate for Busan. And one thing I'm going to say about King of the Hill, maybe I should insert this editor, if you guys can insert this at the start. King of the Hill does reward speed and mobility a little bit more because repositioning coming out of spawn matters a lot more. So even though I would say Lucio is not great on Busan, he is pretty good in King of the Hill. And that's just like the general rule, right? So like you'll have characters like Ashe that generally really like these longer sightlines, but may not always feel great here because she's slower. She's more equipped for Escort and Hybrid. We'll talk about that. But for other Busan maps as a ball main, to be honest, yeah, that's fine. This is not going to be all about like how a specialist or how an expert does it, but yeah, this is fine. This is a good ball map. You'll have plenty of space to stage. And yeah, that's mostly it. For the most part, as I said, I want to focus more on like the general vibes of how easy it is to position on the map. I'm not really going to focus on, oh, there's spin to win text here, or you could do this here, you could do that there. It's good. We'll keep going here. Let's keep going here. Ilios. Let's turn up the audio just a little bit here now that we don't have the thing buzzing in my ear. Okay, Ilios. So we'll look at well really fast here, but just kind of give you guys a general vibe. I think Ilios in terms of breadth is very hit or miss. So this one as well, I would say not very good for sightlines at all, but we'll get the ruins here in just a second. That's the one that everyone kind of knows as like the widow point. Hi, Kitty. And that one is actually pretty darn good for snipers. So for range, I'm going to give Ilios a 2, not good, but with the disclaimer that if you're not playing those 2 points, like these 2 points are kind of mid, they're not great. It's not a 1, but it could be a lot better. That one ruins is actually really quite good. It's just amazing for snipers. So it's definitely a situation where you might actually play a sightline character on this point and then just swap for the other 2 points. It's not terrible to play a sightline character. Like I said, it's a 2, not a 1, but it's not amazing. In terms of the verticality, definitely with the exception of this point where it's useful but not as important. The other 2 points, verticality is super strong. There's so many spaces around the point, on top of the point, and then even if you go here where it's maybe not the best, you've seen a lot of high-level Overwatch, people use the crap out of positions like this here and this here, and even be able to reposition from point onto the high ground here. Let's just go full screen here. Very valuable to do this. And so in terms of verticality, I'd actually give this one closer to a 3, which is pretty high for King of the Hill. King of the Hill generally doesn't get very high verticality values, but you're going to have characters like Winston, Doomfist, Genji, and so on feel a lot better in this map. Even characters like Pharah and Echo, because there's so much more verticality friendliness in the situation here. Now, in terms of breadth, we'll kind of bounce around here. Let's actually go back to one of the other points here. In terms of breadth, definitely not Ilios' strength. It doesn't mean that you can't play characters like Tracer, of course. Like there's plenty of flanks. Doesn't mean you can't play characters like, Ball or Soldier, characters with a lot of mobility and speed. It's fine, but it is a bit more compressed. So you're going to have some dive mobility characters with verticality, Reaper, Genji, Echo, and so on, Winston, feeling good. And the ones that are more very speedy, wide open, like I said, the Soldiers, and even something like a Tracer is not going to feel quite as good here as it does on a couple of the other points. It's not bad. It's just a bit more compressed. I'm going to give it about a 2. It's doable, just not optimal. And so your ability to kind of take in these wide open sight lanes is just not going to quite feel as good. Your hero pool is going to be kind of hit or miss here for sure. But yeah, for here, I like mobility is king, with the exception of ruins. Vertical mobility is king, flyers, divers. And if you're not playing mobility, you really want something with verticality like a Mercy or something like that. Yo, what is Gomer cooking? Thank you on the watch stream. The watch streak. Okay. Gomer's just enthusiastic, guys. Okay, Lijiang. So Lijiang is extremely weird because I think that Lijiang has a lot of sharp extremes. So I actually am going to try to break this down a little bit more point by point here. For this rotation here, in terms of range, it's okay, but it can be very difficult to establish sight lanes because there's a lot of walls. In terms of the value of verticality, it's basically non-existent. Like you could definitely run flyers here because this is pretty good for cover, but especially now that like permaflight is not as strong, verticality is like not super valuable here, not as much as you would think. And then in terms of breadth, it's okay. So I'd give this one in terms of range, maybe a 2, 2.5. In terms of height, like a 2, again, maybe a 1.5. And breadth, I give it like a 2.5, maybe 3. So you're going to have more success with Ball. You're going to have more success with Soldier. You're going to have more success with Tracer. But remember, guys, this is really important. If it gets a bad score for range, or if it gets a bad score for verticality, that is a buff to characters that don't have verticality. Let me explain what I mean. If you're trying to decide between running, let's say, Genji or Tracer here, you're going to prefer Tracer on maps that have a higher breadth score and a lower verticality score. And you're going to prefer Tracer or Genji on maps with a higher verticality score but a lower breadth score. So this is definitely one of those maps where I would prefer Tracer, I would prefer Sombra. Sombra definitely has a bit of verticality, but characters that don't need the verticality as much, whereas a character like Genji or Winston and so on is going to rely more off of that high ground to do what they need to do. This is why you can run characters like Sigma, Zarya here, even though it's a pretty broad map, because you don't really need to worry about high ground all that much. It's just not that relevant. So in terms of your characters to choose here, anything that can get here quickly, KOTH is still KOTH, so fast and speed is great. But you're a little bit more flexible here, keeping in mind that can be very difficult to retake if everybody's just trying to come across on bridge. Okay, so moving on. Let's go to the second point here. And I hate to do it, but like I said, I really think that Lijiang is so different. So different. On a point-by-point basis. This one is a little bit similar to the last one. The sightlines are about the same. I give it like a 2.5. It's not bad for King of the Hill, for sure. But then in terms of breadth, it's okay. It's pretty good, about the same again, 2.53. And then in terms of the verticality, it's again a little bit better, 2.5. So I'd say this point is probably the most flexible of the Lijiang points. It's not as toxic to verticality-based characters. You don't have to have mobility. You can force point. You can fight here without mobility, not a big problem. Verticality is decent, but it's not oppressive. This is definitely like the anything kind of goes on this point here. You can do anything that you want here, really. So you don't really need to worry too much about what you're playing in this point because just about everything can work. Nothing is oppressive. It's like just straight up middle of the road all the way through. Now, this next point, this one is definitely an extreme. Definitely an extreme. Because in terms of range, it's like a 1.5 or a 1. Very, very compressed point. Very compressed point. In terms of the verticality, again, like a 1, 1.5. It doesn't get much worse. It's about the only relevant verticality in this map. It's not even really here. This is a bit overrated. It's very niche. It's more about can you access this high ground from point. That's fairly useful, so I'll give it like a 1, 1.5. Not great. And then in terms of the breadth, like a 2.5. That's probably the most underutilized aspect of this map if you're playing a sniper character, is like you can go coast, you can flank around in dark here, but it's very, very challenging to do so. So this is where brawl, short range, fast, mobility-based characters are king. You know, your Reapers, your Mays, your Torbjorns, your Reinhardts, your Zaryas, your Ramatras, and even the dive characters like a Genji and so on can function relatively well just because it's shorter range. So not a lot of verticality, but it's shorter range. It's Junkrat's amazing here. Anything that involves this. Now, if you are going to run something with a bit of range, as I said, you can use Coast because there's not only verticality here, but there's also your sightlines here. But it can be a very challenging map to function with sniper characters on, to the point to where, like, I honestly think Widowmaker on this point probably has like a 25-20% win rate. Almost impossible to get the sightlines that you need. Very, very difficult. Very difficult to open up space here. How we doing? Okay, everybody following me so far? Any questions, concerns? I'm gonna try to focus on any super niche questions, but if there's anything major, let me know. It's a 1 to 5 scale right now, Victor, but I may not be utilizing it perfectly. Yeah, Lucy's good in that point. Lucy's good up short range. Speed in general is good in King of the Hill, so yeah. Yeah, so Juno, you know, I don't mind answering specific questions on certain heroes briefly, although we won't do them for all heroes. Oh, I'm losing connection. Hey, Pepper? What? Are you playing Overwatch?
No, why?
Okay, my latency just... Okay, yeah, the internet's just exploded.
Okay, I'll close it.
Thank you. Yeah, no problem. I don't know what's going on. My bad, chat. I think so. Yeah, it is. Kind of tragic. I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't even know if that was it or not. It might have just spiked. Sorry, guys. It's still giving me kind of issues, though, so I'm going to wait a second. No, it's still trash. Yeah. Okay. Frick, man. Make sure nothing's running on behind the scenes. I don't think so. No, we're still red barring. Okay, we'll give it a second shot. The game should not affect internet traffic almost at all. Well, it's not Overwatch. It's the internet I have. Okay, I think we're okay. Amari, no scratching, please. Thank you. So Juno, I will get to the Juno question. So Juno, I mean, speed is good in King of the Hill, and Juno is fine in King of the Hill, but King of the Hill can be a bit more compressed than Juno likes. So I'd say Juno is like B tier, King of the Hill, B plus. Like she's solid. She's quite good. I prefer her over Bap, Ana, depending on the most maps probably, but she's not like in Lucio tier for me. Yeah. Okay. Sanctum. Weird map. Very weird map. In terms of range, it's like a 3 or a 2.5. For King of the Hill especially, it's exceptional. In terms of the verticality, just really, really bad. Like 1.5, just almost irrelevant verticality. The only verticality that really matters is if you have verticality, it often means that you can kind of traverse here, but you're really not relying off of verticality because like even characters that don't have verticality can get across here, right? So it's like kind of unfair to say verticality is valuable there. It's like almost completely worthless. You can climb here, but like it's just whatever. Breadth, it's actually not that good. I give it like a 2 because technically you have different angles, you have different lanes, but they're extremely predictable. So what you have here is, this is why it's just one of my least favorite King of the Hill points in the game, is a map that's really good for snipers until you lose a fight. And that's basically almost impossible to retake because the range goes from like 2.5 to like 1. because every single flank that you take is basically shoving it up the enemy's face, and it just does not work. It's just really, really miserable. So I'd give this one a big asterisk to where this map is just not very well designed, and so it's going to feel very hit or miss. It feels amazing for characters like Junkrat and Reaper when you're already won the fight, but to win the fight with Junkrat, Reaper, and the snipers can be really bad. And then it feels amazing to hold it. Basically, this map it's great if you're on defense, it's terrible on attack, and it really doesn't matter what character that you're playing. It's just not great. Like it kind of breaks the script here. I will say characters with mobility are going to feel better here because it allows you to try to get around these flanks. So I'd say this one is definitely more angle pilled because it's almost impossible to retake space without some sort of mobility. Tracer, Doomfist, Winston, Wrecking Ball, and so on. But it's still not great. Alternatively, you could just go full brawl mode and just hope for the best. Not great. Not great. You can tell a map is badly designed when there's just like I don't know how to describe it. It just feels bad for everybody, It's the same problem that we had with Paraiso the other day, so. Okay. Village. Village is, I will say, on the 1.5, 2 for range. It can work. It can just feel very awkward to get shoved in, but at least as opposed to the last one, there's different ways. So I'll give it more of a 2 because there are ways to take different angles. There's about 1, 2, 3, 4 different windows that you can peek out of relevantly. In terms of the verticality, I give this one like a 2.5, actually. The verticality isn't super useful around here, but it's actually very, very useful around point. It's one of the main ways that you should be playing this map with any character like Genji, Freya, Pharah, Echo, Winston, Diva, Mercy, even characters like Lucio and so on can get a lot of value, Baptiste, out of playing around the high grounds around point. Even the stuff over here, verticality is very much rewarded. It's a little limited, which is why I wouldn't say it's higher than 2.5, but it is very important to the point here. And then in terms of breadth, I will give this one also a 2.5, which is, again, not super high. But there are a lot of options about how you want to retake this point. And the difference, you could definitely see like at higher levels, the difference in creativity with how people retake this map kind of scales at higher ranks. Lower ranks going to have a hard time. I encourage lower ranks to be more creative and be more selfish. Just go by yourself if you have to. But there are a lot of ways to retake this, which means that you can have a defender's advantage, but it's not impossible. So characters like Sombra, Tracer, Ball, not great for them because it is a bit compressed, but there are angle options that you can consistently take so that your staging never feels like completely pointless. Even a character like Soldier 76 normally would suffer with how compressed this map is. Like I said, it only has like a 2 in terms of a range, but because you do have a lot of angle options, you can generally find a weak point in the armor to actually do something. Yeah. Okay, let's keep going there. Oasis, as I pronounced it when I was a kid. I was telling Pepper the other day, back in my St. John's River adjacent woodsy backyard as a kid, I found a little pond. Like 9 years old, I was like, Mom, I found an Oasis. Yeah, that's definitely, I did. I told you, it's the spatula thing all over again. Yeah, so Oasis, and this is City Center. I really think we're going to be doing this point by point for the rest of the VOD. I think that makes the most sense, sadly. So a little more tedious, but it's important. Okay, so range, 2. 2.5 maybe if you get defender's advantage. A little bit overrated. The sightlines can feel oppressive at specific points, like spawn camping, pocketed hit scan on high ground, but there's just so many freaking ways to close the gap or avoid the hit scan sightlines. I really hesitate to put this any higher than like a 2.5, especially when you have all these escorts and hybrids that are coming up here. So you can make poke characters work here. It just may not feel consistently good. In terms of the verticality, I'll give it like a 3, 2.5, maybe a 3. I'm going to kind of lean more towards like a 2.5, I think, because again, it's like the relevant verticality. This is underrated, the stuff that you could do over point, but then you still have kind of like an awkward gap between you and where your targets are. And the same thing kind of goes here. It's like, oh, I can use the verticality, but oftentimes it's too far away. So there is relevant verticality, but it is a bit overrated. This point for Freya, yeah, it's kind of exactly my point. Like Freya's fine here, but like, it's not as good as you might think as compared to some of the other points that we could have for Freya. So I'll give it a 2.5. It's all right. It's all right in terms of verticality. So, Genji will feel good here, but the breadth, I'm going to give closer to like a 2.5, 3. because even though it's not super wide, the angles themselves are really good. You have health packs all along the way. Somebody was asking about the relevance of health packs. Well, it's pretty relevant here. You have like 1, 2 lanes per side, right? So you got like 1, 2. There's health packs all along the way. There's lots of ways of wrapping around and rotating. Retaking space from spawn really rewards having some sort of speed or flanker character. We're going to quarters. Yeah, I'll give it a 3. So breadth characters are going to feel amazing here. Speed, soldiers, 76 can feel decent here despite the sightlines not being amazing because there's generally enough angle options. I guess also in terms of breadth here, we can also talk about some of the other supports that fit that category. I think Moira, Kiriko, these are characters that like breadth. They have more mobility options. They can open wider angles. They can help their DPS. You may not see Moira Kiriko playing like that consistently, but if you are a Moira Kiriko that knows what you're doing, then you're going to like broader maps. Maps that allow you to open a little bit wider, do some silly stuff here. Like a Moira Tracer on the flank here is pretty darn scary in this map. Very difficult to dislodge. And characters that are a little bit more compressed are definitely going to have a little bit of a harder time. Yeah, okay, we'll keep going here. Does durability also prefer breadth? I'm not sure what you mean by durability. What am I doing? Kiriko is very good in that point, I would say, yes. Very broad, there's enough sightlines. She also has that little bit of that verticality. She is, I think, the most flexible support in terms of like her positioning, but yeah. Okay, so this one, I think range takes a little bit of a... I actually think range is about the same here. It's about the same. A lot harder to retake the position, but once you do, I do think the high grounds are pretty good. The sightlines are okay. I'm actually going to give this one like a 2.5. It's all right for sightlines, not too bad. And in terms of verticality, it's a mixed bag. I'll give it another 2.5 here just because there are some really relevant capabilities like being able to play the verticality around point. It's way better than the previous point, but that's basically it. Like this and this, there's your verticality. There's your relevant verticality in this map. So there's actually technically a little less verticality than the previous point in terms of like square footage, I guess. But the relevance of where it's placed is better than the previous one. So it's about the same. About the same. Whereas if you're taking fights over here, verticality just isn't all that useful. So, if you're playing Winston into Ram, you're not going to want to be taking fights here too often. You're going to want to be taking fights over here, which does limit you a little bit. And then in terms of the breadth, it's definitely less than the last one, maybe a 2.5. There are options here, like you do have your angles and lanes here, but they're a little bit naked, they're a little bit exposed. There are fewer health packs to sustain you along the way. One of the best breadth angles that you could take as a flanker is definitely going to be coming through here, utilizing this lane here, but it's not as friendly. It's a bit more compressed than the previous one. So I would say anywhere from a 2 to 2.5. So Tracer's fine here, Sombra's fine here, but they're not going to feel quite as strong, at least not as many rotational options as you did with City Center. Would you say that Bastion and Soldier often exist in the same range? Yes, similar ranges. I would say Soldier definitely has a slight range advantage over Bastion, though. Slight range advantage, and definitely a breadth advantage. So it can go way, 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 way wider. Like I would say, mobility is sustained. Durability is also sustained. Do sustain prefer breadth? No, sustain does not prefer breadth. So sustain prefers characters that they can actually reach, and if they can't reach it, they run out of resources really fast. So Ram would prefer a point like this. It's a bit more compressed than City Center most of the time. And speaking of compressed, speaking of breadth, this is one of the most compressed points in the game. So we talked about our Lijiang Tower Control Center. This is Oasis counterpart, where the sightlines are going to get like a 2, like we're slowly degenerating. Not a great sightline map. I won't say it's like a 1, but 1.52, not great for long-range characters. And then in terms of the verticality, again, not great, probably even weaker. I'd say 2 again as well. Really only relevant here. I mean, you could argue, 1.5, but I could see that this is a pretty relevant space, so you can get value out of your mobility here. And then in terms of breadth, we're like down to a 1.5. Like it's really not good. Like not good at all. Both lanes that you're fighting for are very compressed and small, and they're very close to main, so it's really hard to wrap around. This is why you'll often see Tracer, Sombras, Balls that are playing on this map. They actually just go underneath. So this gives a little bit of breadth points, which is maybe why it's a 2 instead of a 1.5. But you literally just take forever to get there because if you get caught here as Tracer into a Junkrat, or you get caught here as Tracer versus a Cassidy, there just really isn't a way to wrap around or position. Like you're just pretty much straightforward at them. So this one is definitely the more brawl-oriented map. This is definitely the Lijiang Tower Control Center. This is definitely the one that can feel challenging as Hitscan, can feel challenging as a flanker. but it's a Junkrat dream, it's a Reaper dream, it's a Ramatra dream, it's a Lucio dream, it's a Brigitte. Brigitte, if she had speed, is pretty good here. Like, there's just a lot of choices. I wouldn't say it's the worst design map. Definitely not. I don't mind the variety, especially considering that the different points are okay. And there are options, but I agree that it feels a little bit compressed at times, but yeah. This one's definitely more compressed. Okay. Let's keep going. What am I doing? I'm supposed to go to maps here. One more King of the Hill map, and then we could take a brief pause. Samoa. I think one of the better map designs that Overwatch has had recently, just because it feels like there are definitely stylistic and playstyle differences for each point, but they aren't as sharp as some of the other ones, and there always feels like there's an option here. Now, this one might be a little bit challenging. We'll talk a little bit more about this one. So this is Volcano. Ba-ba! And Volcano, in terms of range, I'm going to give it a 2, 2.5. Again, it really depends on where you're taking fights. Like, it can feel like a 3. If you're pushing into like a damage boosted hit scan on point here, it can feel like oppressive. But the reality is that most of the fights, with whether they're happening here or happening at the choke, hit scan's going to struggle. Longer sightlines are going to struggle here, so I'm going to give this one probably a 2. It's okay. It's not impossible, bless you, but it's not amazing. Now, in terms of the verticality, yeah, like 1.5. Like, just not really relevant. You can play little games here. You could definitely play some games here, but these are not positions that are super relevant. This is probably the most relevant verticality position in the game for your characters like Reaper, Winston, Genji, Pharah, and so on. But like, your verticality just doesn't really do a lot here. Cheers, Orb. This is just not amazing. Not amazing. So in terms of like your character's map voting guide, more like maps guide. Well, okay, so the reason why we're doing it this way is because I want you to be like, okay, this is my hero pool. My hero pool is Mercy, Lucio. Okay, so if I get, Havana, Paraiso, Lijiang Tower, I have a pretty clear idea of which one I want to vote for depending on which hero I want to play, right? I want Havana. I want Paraiso for Mercy. Excellent Mercy maps. Lots of verticality, lots of range, which is like what Mercy likes. But if I get Lijiang Tower and I've got a Mercy... Mercy BAP hero pool, I'm in trouble. Like, that's not a great... I'm not in trouble, but I'm going to have to figure it out. I'm going to have to start. So, okay, in terms of the breadth here, again, I'll say this is like a 2. The reason why it doesn't get higher, even though it has technical breadth, is because this lane here is not irrelevant, but it's pretty bad. So basically, when you're retaking space, most of the time you're kind of limited to only approaching from this angle, which is why it can feel a bit repetitive to play Tracer Wrecking Ball. There's a lot of space in this map that's not wasted, but it can be difficult to retake space on. So I would give this one like a 2. Not great for those wider heroes, not amazing. You're going to have to struggle to stage, and it can be a little bit repetitive. Okay. This is going to be beach. The one pictured. And this is, on a range perspective, 2, 2.5, doable. Mostly from these opposite high grounds. We've all played versus a really good hit scan here, or maybe even a hit scan off to the side here. Pretty good. There's enough space for you to get it done for sure. Retaking can definitely be a challenge, which is why it really does not get higher than a 2 or a 2.5, but it is doable. In terms of verticality, I'll give this one about a 2, 2.5. Not a lot of opportunities to utilize that verticality, but where it is usable is pretty nice. You have opportunities to climb around here. You have opportunities technically to climb around here. This is definitely a very valuable verticality location right around here, and that is also mirrored on the other side. So characters with verticality absolutely can function here. It's not going to be your strongest point, but it's going to be better than probably the other 2 points of Samoa. It's going to be your best point for Genjis and Winstons and so on, just because of that verticality. In terms of breadth, again, I'm going to give this one like a 2.5. Or maybe, I don't know. I might give this one a 3 because it's a little compressed, but the options are pretty good. Like, you can go here, you can go underneath, you can also wrap all the way around behind. And then this one, as opposed to the previous one, we really only had one other good lane option. This is really good for Tracers and Sombras and Soldiers and Balls and Winstons and Divas and even pocketed hit scans that want to open a wide angle, right? Like, anything with a bit of speed, your DPS Moiras, your DPS Kirikos, you know, like you have a lot of breadth that's really good. There's a lot of cover. There's, you know, relevant health packs on both sides. That definitely what we said about the health packs, right? They're relevant on the breadth measure for sure. So I'll give this one a 3. This one is definitely by far the most hybrid map, which is I think why people like it the most, because really nothing's too bad here. You can run hit scan okay. It's not impossible to retake. Your flat characters you're fine. Your fast, your brawl, your poke, your dive, your high mobility, your skirmish, whatever you want to call it. Basically everything can function here, and it really kind of becomes a skill match of who's going to play it the best. Is this one a little bit odd for Soldier because you can use dives? Right, well, yes and no, but Soldier can also very well function retaking space here, pressuring here, being patient, even opening wide here, right? And then you can very patiently take space here. If you're trying to retake Soldier through this angle here, I'd say it's not the best, but I would say Soldier is probably better here than on the previous point. Definitely harder. Yeah, very, very flexible point, and it's also a very beautiful point too. Okay. Last one for Samoa. This one's going to be downtown. And this one is the one that is definitely more favored for, you know, hit scan. And when I say hit scan, I just mean range characters for sure. Range characters are going to feel great. And fast characters are going to feel great. Those shorter range, slower characters or characters that are overly reliant off of verticality might struggle. In terms of sightlines, it gets about a 2.5, maybe even a 3. I might give it actually a 3 here. It's got very, very, very strong sightlines for a King of the Hill map. Definitely up there with Busan, maybe a little bit behind. Lots of high grounds, lots of different ways of retaking space here. And then in terms of verticality, I'm going to give it like a 2. Again, not very high, but the places that you can access it, which are here and here, are very important. So it's not, there's not a lot of high grounds, but the ones that are relevant are actually pretty important. Technically, this high ground is relevant too, and this one as well, but significantly less so. So I would say maybe 2 at most, a 2.5, not a very high ground relevant map. So you're going to have a hard time here with anything that relies off of that. Now, in terms of breadth, this one's also quite good. I'm going to give this one a 3 as well, maybe even a 3.5. Only reason why I wouldn't necessarily go higher than a 3 or a 3.5 is that essentially you have a lot of these lane options, but then the targeting might be far away from the high ground. So you take these flanks and then you still have a really nasty sightline. So breadth, we'll say like a 3. It's good. It's good. A lot of those, again, Tracer Sombras. I'm going to try to mix things up here. Let's pull up let me pull up the Overwatch hero list here. Because I'm going to try to, if you're going to watch this whole video and you're like not sure really where your hero stands, Overwatch. Overwatch heroes. Like Amalga. If you are really good at repositioning with Amalga, definitely a character that likes breadth, like wide open lanes. Feels unintuitive, but that's absolutely a big thing for Amalga. Feels okay for Doomfist for that very front. Might not feel as good for like a Ramattra because he doesn't quite have that lateral speed. But I'm trying to look through here. Is there anything else that really comes to mind here? Yeah, Juno. Yeah, movement, speed. Yeah, sure. It's okay. Okay. Any questions with King of the Hill? Any questions with any of these maps? Any major big points here before we move on to maps that are going to demand a little bit less finagling? Speaking of which, Circuit Royale. Yeah, May feels good in Samoa until that last point. Your verticality is not something that you can really exploit as easily there. The breadth is a little annoying. And then it's a little bit almost too ranged for me. Hazard. Definitely a character that likes verticality a lot. Does not like breadth very much. Even when he gets his minor perk with the faster jump, he's just too slow. Diva also is not a character that loves breadth as much. Diva and Hazard are cut from very similar cloths where they're mobility tanks, but they like going up. They don't like going long distances. They're just too slow. Too slow. Lucio, definitely he's good in King of the Hill because movement's important or relevant to the map. Not a sightline character. Not really a breadth character either. Like there are other supports that do that better. Okay with verticality. So the less breadth, the less verticality, the better the Lucio does. The less sightlines, the better Lucio does. No, it's not a dumb question at all. I think Lucio actually does a little. Lucio's a bit underrated on verticality. That's kind of a fun one to consider. So yeah, to wrap that up, King of the Hill, if we ignore every single map detail, fast characters are just always good in King of the Hill, like almost always. Even if it's like, Busan, Genji's not as good in Busan because there's not a lot of verticality. But just being fast because it's a timer, like tick, 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 just being fast is good. Just being fast. So take that with a very heavy grain of salt. Yeah, interesting question, Basilisk. We'll actually talk about that a little bit here. I do not have the stats page open for maps on the side. I don't want to look at the stats page because I'm not sure that every rank is going to be playing the map appropriately, and I want to kind of educate people how they ought to be playing it. And I also think if we open the stats page, we'd get completely swamped because I would also have to compare the win rate of the character on all maps versus the win rate of the character on that map. And then I'm also like, are gold Kirikos really angling? Is that not tanking? Like, Kiriko should be good on Samoa because of the angles, but maybe the Kiriko players are just heal botting and then just winning off of Kitsune, in which case a gold Kiriko might actually like a more compressed map than she technically should. It just opens a whole can of worms. I'd rather, one of the few times where I'm actually going to trust my gut and my experience coaching this game, whether it's, then I am going to trust stats here. But yeah, great question. And something that I actually probably should have brought up earlier. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of lump Escort and Hybrid together, which maybe is a little bit unfair, but I'm going to do it anyway. Escort and Hybrid are basically payload maps. Hybrid being you have to capture the payload and then push it, and then Escort is just, you just push it. And generally, Escort and Hybrid is the more popular game mode in lower ranks because it doesn't require as much dynamic attention. Like, you don't have to worry about a lot of things besides just shooting what's on your screen. Now, whether that's good or bad, it doesn't really matter. I'm not going to comment on it. But I am going to say that characters that are better about just kind of pressuring what's on your screen are going to do better in Escort Hybrid. Escort Hybrid has one big difference between King of the Hill, and that is that almost all of the range scores are going to be higher. So snipers are going to feel a lot better, poke characters are going to feel a lot better, but also crucially, whereas some of the King of the Hill points were very compressed, so dive tanks could struggle. You're going to like snipers and you're going to like mobile tanks a lot of the times. Now, Circuit is not exactly the best example, but with these big, broad spaces, having characters like Doomfist, Wrecking Ball, Winston is going to feel a little bit better than you might think, or even characters like Sigma that have range. So it can be challenging to close the gap. I was coaching a Masters game earlier, and somebody was playing Zarya and Eichenwalde second, this massive high ground, and it was just miserable, right? And that's like the key thing right there. So we want snipers, we want mobility most of the time. Yeah, we'll go from there. So Circuit Royale. I mean, we're not going to go over every point on Circuit. I think verticality is decent here. I'll give this one about a 2.5. It's better than I think people expect it to be because the verticality with places like this, the verticality with places like this, and crucially on third point, I would give it like a 2.5. It's okay. It can win you some really crucial moments here, but beyond that, it's not amazing. In terms of breadth, how wide the map is, terrible. Up until third point, it's okay. Third point has some decent options, but I would give this probably a 2. And the reason why it's a 2 is because even though third is really broad, on first, it's one of the most compressed maps in the game. And the second point, it's also one of the compressed maps in the game because even though there technically are flank options, they're very difficult to set up and are very, very unfriendly. Now, does that mean that you can't play Wrecking Ball here? No, and this is why, okay? Because Wrecking Ball is also really good on sniper maps because he can close these long sightline gaps very quickly. And so this is why you have to have a full understanding of how your character likes to position. Maybe we'll do that for another video because Wrecking Ball is actually decent on Circuit Royale because the sight lines in Circuit Royale are like 4 out of 5, 4.5 out of 5. Very long sight lines, very difficult to close the gap unless you're absurdly fast and can hide your head box. So this is where, essentially, when you're looking at a character like Wrecking Ball, he's very bad because breadth sucks, but he's so freaking fast at gap closing, Doomfist as well, very good, that it doesn't matter as much. Now, if you think about that, you think about, okay, well then what tank is bad here? Well, surprisingly, most tanks aren't too shabby, but any tank that isn't very fast can struggle or doesn't have good sightlines can struggle, depending on the situation. Yeah, he's also immune while closing, right? So, your Sigmas can do great here. Wrecking Balls can do great here. Even Rhine, because there's not a lot of breadth, so he can kind of just focusing and mitigating on what's in front of his face, can be very good here. Yeah. But yeah, two breadth, maybe 1.5. The only thing that I would say is 2 is because third point's so broad. But yeah. Did you know in the third point of this map there's no mega health back vault? Yes. And that's exactly why it doesn't get like a 2.5 for breadth, because yes, there is technically breadth on 2, which is very important, but it's not as useful as it should be. Like I said, this map is just kind of a train wreck. It's gotten a little better, but still has major problems. Queen has no bad maps. Definitely a hot take. I would say this is one of those bad maps where it can be very difficult to gap close, and it's very hard to mitigate on front. So. Okay, if your character likes range, if your character doesn't like breadth, you're gonna like Circuit Royale. It's like why a character like Junkrat, even though he's not amazing because of how long the sightlines are, because there's never, like, you don't have to flank deep, you could just kind of put your attention into smaller areas. Junkrat can be decent. Yeah, okay. Dorado, whoops, I didn't uncheck. There you go, Dorado. So, sightlines for Dorado, I'll give it like a 3.5, maybe a 4 even. I think I'm going to give it a 4. Very, pretty consistently solid all the way through. Maybe even 4.5. Like, it's just, there's decent sightlines all the way through. Like, all the way through, there's decent sightlines. You can run, especially in defense, you know, your Widemakers, your Hanzos, your Cassidys, your Ashes, your Soj. They're just always good. Like, they're always going to be good here. Now, the interesting aspect of Dorado is that it is really good for sightlines, but it is also really good for verticality. I'd give it about a 4 for verticality. The only reason I wouldn't maybe give it a higher, I don't know, chat. Like, maybe, I'm in hindsight going to be like, should have been a 5, but it doesn't have to be perfect. The number is not that important. I'm going to tell you approximately this is going to be good for your verticality map. So there's this weird irony where this map is very, like, pretty decent for Genji, but it's also pretty good for snipers. So you're either leveraging your verticality to get nice and close to people, or you're leveraging your range to keep your distance here. So there's a lot of ways to leverage verticality on this map, first, second, and to a lesser extent, third. And then in terms of breadth, it's pretty good broad as well. First point, maybe not as many options, but they are there if you're smart enough to take them. Second point, breadth is just, there's so much space in the sides. And third point, again, a little bit more limited, but there are some options. I'll give this one only a 3, which seems a little bit crappy. But it's mostly because a lot of the breadth is kind of front-loaded into second point, whereas first and third don't have near as many choices. So it can be challenging for certain flankers, certain flexible characters, even like a Soldier 76, to like find the angle that you need. It could just feel a little bit difficult too. 3 out of 5. 3 out of 5. So pretty flexible map. A lot of characters can function here. The characters that I think that won't function as well are characters that are more short range focused and that don't have mobility. So you'll still have your points, like you can still hold your chokes here and so on, but there are going to be some points that are going to be more difficult. Third point's going to feel a little bit better for you. You're going to notice a pattern here. A lot of Escort hybrids have more friendly, compressed heroes. In other words, there's fewer breadth options, so your Ramatras and Ryans, Junkrats, Reapers, Torbjorns, and so on are going to feel a little bit better on third point. Yeah. Okay. Let's keep going here. Is the lack of breadth on first point why people get stuck here? Yes. Yes. You could technically go high ground, but it could feel a long way and very unfriendly to do so. It's better than it used to be, but yes, the lack of breadth and also the extreme verticality on first point is definitely why it is so defender favored. Why do I think Dorado is so unpopular? Because first point, it's just literally first point, kind of what we said, and a couple of other people don't like snipers as much either. I think people really have problems, especially in lower ranks, solving this map because the answers are not easy. That's why. So it is definitely a skill issue, but it's also an understandable skill issue because it's not easy to find ways to take space in this map. Yep. So yeah, definitely one of the more unpopular, I think, hybrids or escorts. Yeah, Winston's great here. Winston's definitely a dive tank with speed and verticality. So he doesn't mind the breadth as much as like a Diva or a Hazard does. So, okay, Havana. Range here, it's like a 4.5. Crazy good. Second point definitely causes some issues, but first and third, about some of the best sniper games sniper points in the game. Just very difficult to gap close on you, very few rotational options. And then even second point, I'd still give it like a 3.5 can still be totally fine. Third point is just insane. Like third point has crazy sightlines. So give it a 4.5, I think, all the way through. We may not have a 5 because I think if Circuit or Havana don't get a 5, I don't know if anybody gets a 5. So yeah, definitely a 4.5 or a 5, about as sniper heavy as it gets. And then in terms of the verticality, I'm going to give it like a 2.5. There are some very relevant points of verticality here. I think relevant verticality is definitely right here. And then again, relevant verticality here. A little bit of relevant verticality here. And then obviously everybody knows the relevant verticality here. I'm kind of highlighting not just the spots where you can take high ground, but where it actually matters. And I think that's kind of the key point here. So that's why I'm going to give it a 2.5. So you can play Winston in Havana. You can. It's just not going to feel as good as you'd like. You can play Genji. You can. It's just going to feel a little bit more challenging. In terms of breadth, and I think this is part of the reason why Havana can feel a little bit toxic, is that it's a very broad map. But the breadth, when you actually look at it, is not super friendly. This is really crappy. This is doable, but very isolated. This is technically an angle that just, right? Not so good. And then this one's very isolated and there's not a lot of support for here. And then also to get from like point A to point B or point B to point C, there's these open sight lines where you can't really transition quickly. So there's technically a lot of breadth, but the effective breadth is not all that good. It can still feel really difficult to actually take space into snipers. If you've ever played Tracer on this map, you know what I'm talking about. Like you could stage literally all the way around and you're like, the Widow just grabbed with the high ground, or the Zen standing in the open, I got to double blink to get to him, right? So it could feel really challenging for more speedy characters to get there. Now, characters like Wrecking Ball can still make it work because they're just so absurdly fast, and they have the verticality that maybe a character like Tracer Sombra does not. Sombra does, but you know what I mean. But yeah, like it could feel challenging. And the same thing happens with third, right? There's a lot of angles and lanes that can work, but if you've ever played like a flanker trying to break this here, I mean, it just sucks, man. Like there's just nowhere to go. Like, oh, you could just go this way, right? Well, but oh my gosh, it's so far from everything, right? This is definitely an improvement in the map design process, but a lot of the breadth, I'm going to give this one like a 2.5. It's technically there, and it's technically there in spades, but it just doesn't work near as well as you think it might. Just not near as well. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's why it's one of the least popular maps, I think, in higher ranks, because there are just very few solutions to certain problems. Would you say this map can be a struggle for mid and short range hit scans? Well, remember, range is relative. So it's an exceptional Cassidy map until they go Asher Widow, right? You're going to destroy Genjis and Tracers until they go better range hero, right? And this is why you'll often see like a little bit of a rock, paper, scissors. You roll out on Cassidy, you know, they swap to Ashe, and then you swap to Hanzo, and then they swap to Widow on third point, and then you just eventually escalating the range. Now, Cassie still can make a lot of things work on second point. It's compressed enough to make it work, but yeah. Okay. Junkertown. Now, this map has gotten better in terms of the flexibility the compositions work. So range is still going to be up there in the 4s. I'm still going to give this one a 4. Maybe a little bit less than Havana. Definitely a little bit less than Havana. But range is still objectively a challenge here. Like, there's still lots of sight lines on first, third especially, second point as well. But there's slightly more relevance for all the other stats. Verticality. First point's not amazing, but it can be fairly relevant. Very, very relevant on second point, and also pretty darn relevant on third too. So I'm actually going to give this one a 3, a little bit of a step up over Havana in terms of the relevant verticality. It's not just the high grounds, the number of high grounds it's also the quality. So if your character likes high grounds, you got your Doomfist, Genjis, even something like Mei with her Mei wall, actually can make a lot of stuff work. Junkrat, right? You take high grounds, it allows for a lot of staging and setup opportunities. And in terms of breadth, I'm going to give this one like a 3 as well. It's just a little bit better than Havana. You have more staging grounds for fast characters that can wrap around. And even if that one doesn't feel too good, well, you could wrap around this way. And then because of the number of structures here, even if they're running Widowmakers, there's enough cover for you to use these flanks to actually get to targets. That's the problem with Havana. The paths are there, but then once you're there, the target's still too far away. But with Junkertown, there's enough cover, structures, health packs, small rooms, staging grounds. It's not perfect, but it's slightly better where there's just going to be a little bit more options for those flat-oriented characters, that flanking Reinhardt, that flanking Moira, that Reddit Lucio to close the gap. Now, on third point, I think it's definitely a step downwards. Many of these take way too long, are way too isolated, and this is why I think third point is by far the worst design point, which is, I think, maybe a bit ironic. I think people would think first or second, but I actually think third can be a little bit worse. Way too snowbally, way too problematic, but they're still technically there, but it is definitely a step down. Spyly apps for 2 hours about stuff that we'll put into practice. Please don't say that. Don't say that to me. Dude, I had people begging me for the Flashpoint guide, literally begging for weeks. Like dozens of people. And it's like my least viewed video of like the last year. Oh dear. It is what it is. I should know better, but I enjoy talking about it. Okay. Yes. Let's keep going here. Rialto. One of the more, has some awkward points, but definitely one of the more dynamic escorts. You have in terms of sightlines, I'm going to give this one like a 3.5. Again, it's slowly stepping down from Havana. There are some really oppressive points. Like this can feel really challenging to take as attackers. And obviously this is like infamously bad, right? But once you get past that, that's pretty much it. And crucially, in a couple of these, especially first point, there is a lot of architecture that you can use to gap close. So oppressive sightlines, sure, but not as bad as some of the other ones. In terms of breadth, we'll kind of skip around here. Breadth, it's okay. I'll give it like a 3. It's not great, but they're decent. There aren't a lot of options, but those options are decent. Like, for example, there's really only one option on early first point. It's this side here, but it is a really good side for you. And then once you get to like here, again, there's really only one option here. You can technically go around here, but it kind of sucks. But it's a decent option. So I would say in terms of breadth, I don't think about chat. I might actually be thinking it's like a 2.5. I'm thinking it's like a 2.5. This is probably like your best angle option, but there aren't a lot of choices for characters like Tracer and Sombra. There's just not a lot of options here. So not the best. Verticality, though, definitely going to give this one like a 3. Maybe, yeah, I'll give it a 3. There's just some really, really, really relevant positions that are very, very strong. Like these high grounds here, these high grounds here. I mean, basically all of second point is all about high grounds. Like this is basically like high ground central. If you've got verticality here, you could do so many things here. And then even early on third, verticalities could be very valuable. Playing these sightlines here, it means you don't have to walk through the pane here or walk through the pane here. You just skip it, and then now you're all of a sudden providing value. Heck, you can even approach from this side here. Now, the reason why it gets a 3.5, maybe even a 3 on terms of range, is because this definitely is a dramatic compression of both the breadth and sightlines. And so it's worth noting here that you may want to consider swapping when you get to third point if your character is more sniper focused or your character is more flanking focused, more dive focused. Characters like Winston, Wrecking Ball, unless you have a lot of ultimates here, you're going to really struggle to break this choke because this immediately transitions into what we talked about in Dorado, where things just get more compressed. And so you're going to have a really have a hard time. Does Bastion do goods third? He does okay. Yeah, Bastion is not like the best short range character ever, but he's probably better than like if you were playing like, let's say, Ashe. Once you get past this high ground here, Bastion's probably going to feel a lot better, even just off of nade alone. Nade alone is going to feel a lot better. So, what do you even do on Tracer second point? Yeah, I mean, it's tricky, right? Like, you basically just kind of have to play underneath, harass. That's basically it. There aren't a lot of options depending on where things are holding. Now, you can stage through here. I think a lot of people forget that this spawn room actually wraps all the way around behind under. Very, very important flank. But yeah, it is very, very challenging. Very challenging map. Route 66. I hate this map. Definitely not my favorite. The range is definitely up there with like 3.5 or a 4 even. It's incredibly sniper focused. The breadth I think is incredibly overrated because it's incredibly open. It can be very difficult. And then I think verticality here is actually quite good. So I'm going to give this one like a 3 for verticality, maybe even higher. Lots of breadth angle options, but ones that are very naked, very, very exposed. The verticality can be very good on maps. So like if you're playing characters like Genji, like Freya, you're going to be able to make this point work. Even Winston can make this point work pretty well. But there are certain points where the breadth is really bad. I think right here is one of the infamous ones where it can be very challenging to break. You basically have all in there, a little bit of something to the side here, or a little bit naked to the side here. It can feel pretty challenging to gap close there. So range, like I said, 3.5 or a 4. Very good. Verticality, I would give it like a 3. Not a ton of verticality, but the verticality, as I said, is extremely relevant. And then in terms of the breadth, I'm going to give it like a 2.5 or a 3. Because there is a lot of breadth there. The problem is this, are you going to be able to use it without getting your head blown off? And then that breadth really, really falls off on third point. Very much like a lot of the Escort hybrids. We're going to hear me saying this. Where once you get to here, nobody cares if you're playing Trace or Wrecking Ball anymore. Maybe if you're playing Reaper with a little bit of that verticality. Maybe if you're playing Widowmaker. Maybe if you're playing Genji so that you can actually utilize the high grounds here. But you get stuck in the kind of the wind tunnel here. And this is a place where a lot of nasty heroes come to roost. You're talking about your Junkrats, your Maze, Ramatras, Torbjorns. These characters are going to, even the Baptistes, Zenyattes, a lot of damage can come down through here. And there's not a lot of good lanes here. This one's pretty bad. This one is decent, but pretty isolated and kind of demands you to have verticality here. So yeah, keep that in mind. Yeah, I do not enjoy Route 66. Not my favorite map by any means. Shambali. Hate this map too. 3.5 on a range scale. 3.5. And it's only 3.5 because there are technically lots and lots of corners to play, especially on first point. But if we start talking about what you're talking about on second point, if we start talking about third point, my goodness gracious, it is abysmal. It is just Sniper City with even fewer options than even arguably Junkertown. It is brutal. Absolutely brutal. So sightlines, range characters are going to love this map on most points, especially those second and third points. Lots of big, juicy sightlines. In terms of the verticality, decent. I would give it like a 2.5, but really top heavy. Like getting over this choke here, or being able to actively play in this room here, or this angle here. Also, the ability to contest high ground, or rotate to this flank here, or to be able to effectively utilize this flank here. You're like, oh my gosh, the options are endless. And then you go to here and you're like, oh, this like basically nothing to use verticality on at all. So we'll go 2.5, but extremely top heavy with that verticality. And so that means that you're going to have characters like Genji, Freya, Winston. Honestly, even characters like Mercy are going to like dramatically fall off here in comparison to Ana, Zen, and so on, because there just isn't anywhere to move. There isn't really anywhere to hide. And then in terms of the breadth, it's just, I'll give it a 3 because I do think the breadth is decent, 3.5 even, but there are very, very few options, and those are often very predictable. It's a little bit like Havana, where like everybody's going to kind of know what you're going to do. And then also once you get this angle, there's these massive sight lines to gap close. So, you're going to be doing some crazy angles. Circuit Royale, but cool. Maybe, yeah. I appreciate the sub. I almost said I appreciate the res. I don't know where my brain was going there. And then even third, right? You're like, oh, I got this big angle here, but there's just nothing here, right? There's not even a health pack here. Like, look at this. There's just nothing, right? Like, there's the mini over here, and that's basically it. So there's a lot of naked space here. And so, you're going to find mixed success with Wrecking Ball Tracer. It's fine. It won't be too much of a problem. Pocketed Soldier on the flank, your DPS Moira Kiriko again. But the breadth is there, but it's very, very, very... it's one directional. Basically, you really only get the one wide angle. You know, when you're playing wide angles on first point, the breadth, you're not going in here. You know, you're going to swing to here every time. There's no other option, right? You're going to swing to here. There's no other option. You're going to swing to here because guess what? You don't have access to this entire side of the map as the attacker. So this might as well not even exist. And so it's very, very myopic. I think that's the term I was looking for. So if your character is super mobility pilled and doesn't have a lot of verticality in first and second, it may actually not feel quite as good as you think. All right. Yeah, can feel brutal. Watchpoint Gibraltar. Sightlines. Now, this one's funny. I'm going to give this one actually a 3.5 or a 4. 3.5 or a 4. You could argue that this probably should just be a cozy 4. I think I might give it a 4. A step down from Havana, for sure. But the sightlines here are very, very long, and they're consistent. First, second, and third, you really don't have a bad point for a long sniper at all. Like, they're just always going to be fine. Which is why this map is so strange, because you give it a 4 for range, and then you give it like a 4 for verticality, because there's just high grounds everywhere. And then you give it like a 2.5, 3 for breadth. There aren't a lot of good angle options, especially once you get to third point. It can be very compressed. And then you kind of have like a cornucopia of characters that can actually perform here. Like there's pretty clear options. Like you're not going to love Junkrat here necessarily. You might have a problem with Reaper, maybe. You know, maybe like a Lucio will have a hard time here too. But like snipers do pretty good here. Verticality focused characters do pretty good here. You know, we talked about just wide, broad characters like Tracer, Sombra are not great here, but they can also do okay here. So there's a broad variety of characters that could do okay here, but you got to use your kit. Like if you're playing a sightline character, you got to get good sightlines. If you're using a flanker, you can't play patty cake on point. You got to find a different angle. If you're using your verticality, you got to use your verticality. So there's a lot of flexibility with what you can play here, with the exception of maybe some brawl heroes. But you got to actually utilize these things well. So again, 4 verticality, 4 sightlines, like a 2.5 in terms of the breadth. They're just, your characters like Soldier might struggle here because it's going to be hard to out-angle a Widowmaker or a Sojourn. Like if you're attacking first point here and you go here a Soldier or you go here a Soldier, well, the problem is you're not really like surprising. Oh, I didn't see you coming. Wow. It's like, I mean, I'm already looking here, jackass, right? Like you're fricked, right? And the same thing goes for some of these Moiras and Balls and Tracers where it can be hard to catch people by surprise, right? There aren't a lot of wide flanking options, especially when you compare it to some of the other maps that we have looked at and some other maps that we haven't even looked at yet. Yep, good map for Freya. It's got the sightlines for Freya. It's got the verticality for Freya. It's not super broad. Freya doesn't really like super broad. Yeah, so, yep. Ashe is pretty good here. Ashe definitely has like that little spice of verticality with Coach Gun that characters that like Cass and honestly, even to a lesser extent, Sojourn don't really have. And then the sightlines are great. So, yeah. Okay. Let's keep going here. I'm not answering you, Sarah Lee. Let's actually stay on the Escort, the hybrid front. We'll go to Flashpoint in a second, but let's keep going here. I was about to weep when I saw the hybrid, and I'm like, oh, wait, there's a lot of winter maps, so I don't have as many as I think I have to do.
Welcome to Lizard World.
All right, I guess we could take a quick pause. Any questions, y'all, so far? I'll be happy to answer any questions, especially if they're correlated with, where would you grade X hero? That might be the most relevant question to ask. Like, where does Torbjorn fall on the breadth range verticality scale? Because that's probably the stuff that's going to be worth answering. How long have we been going? About an hour and 15, hour and 10. Of course, Wandering Toad. Favorite payload map? I don't know. I don't have really strong opinions on maps. I mean, I don't really like a lot of the Escort maps very much. Rialto's fine. I think I like the hybrid ones better. And I would lean into like the generic Blizzard World is sometimes fine to me on the character. King's Row. I mean, honestly, okay, everyone hates on King's Row because it's like, oh, King's Row slop. But it is one of the less offensive Escort hybrid maps up until third point. It really just depends on the hero that I'm playing. What exactly is breadth? Just how wide the map is. So how many flank options that you have, which definitely rewards speed and so on. You said sightlines being predictable is a bad thing. I wasn't sure. Sightlines being predictable. I think I meant more about the flanks, like the breadth of the flanks being predictable. Where would you grade Genji? For range, he's like a 2, right? Not great. But that's usually not a huge problem. I would say breadth, Genji's like a 3. So he's definitely mobile, maybe 3.5, but definitely doesn't care about going super wide as characters like other characters do. And the verticality is like a 4.5, like very, very, very good verticality. But because he has a little bit of that breadth, right, he is somewhat flexible. And so more compressed maps, Genji's fine because his lack of range means that, like, remember, scoring low on the range spectrum is not a bad thing. Remember, because if you score low, it means you do better in the more compressed maps. So if you play Genji, 2 out of 5 for range. Yeah, but if you're playing Control Center, even though there's not a lot of relevant verticality, even though there's not a lot of relevant flanks, he's still fine. Like, I wouldn't play Genji over Junkrat there, but he can compete, right? So I'd say like a 2 on the range, a 4.5, 5 even on the verticality. Dash, double jump, wall climbing, it just doesn't get much better than that, right? And then in terms of the angle, the breadth, I'd say like a 3. Where does Juno fall? Range, I would say like a 3, 2.5, not super far, but better. Breadth, like a 3.5. And then verticality, like a 3.5. And maybe even higher once you get to a major perk. So like, Juno exists kind of in that middle ground, but she definitely favors verticality more so than the average support hero. So I'd say Juno up there with Mercy and maybe Bap are characters that really like verticality. Lucio as well, but prefers slightly longer sightlines than, say, Lucio. Would you say there's a map that exists that hits at least 4+ in all metrics? Well, probably not. Probably not. Maybe Blizzard World is going to be somewhat close, or some of the Escort or hybrids have like a lot of high ground, a lot of haircut, but I'm not really sure. What about Brig in the skill? Brig is like a 2.5 in the range because Armor Pack opens up a lot of her utilities spread out, so like a 2.5. Verticality is like basically nothing. 1.5, just terrible. And then in terms of her breadth, it's also really bad, so it's like a 2. So you really like Brigitte on maps that don't have a lot of breadth, and then also, I mean, Brigitte is weird. Like it's the lack of speed boost after shield bash that really limits her. Really, she's that weird hybrid. How does May fare with flexibility? Just middle of the road. 3 range, 2.5 verticality, 2.5 breadth. She's fine. She's never the best. You considered vertical cover for verticality? I did, but the way that Pharah and Echo play now, as my stream just dies. Okay, I think we're back-ish. Man, the internet's been terrible today. I did consider vertical cover for Pharah Echo for sure. But vertical cover for Pharah Echo matters a little bit less than it used to, especially for Pharah, because you're not hovering in the sky for as long. Yeah, apologies for the internet, guys. No, it's not you. Give me 1 second. I'll be right back. Yeah, we're still kind of fluctuating right now. Not super good right now. So if I get locked in and issues come up, just let me know, just so I don't ramble on without paying attention. But the problem is the 5G. the problem is the 5G, but the problem is I just don't really have a lot of other options right now. So like as bad as it is in consistency right now, it's still better than like Spectrum. But honestly, maybe not anymore. I don't know, chat. Maybe we, frick, I don't know. Maybe I'll bring an amp over and try to improve the angle a little bit. I don't know. Surely this will fix it. I'm helping. There, fixed. No. The problem is it says it's like 4 bars. It's basically where it's always at. Yeah, we're not looking good right now, boys and girls. I'll close that down. Close that down. No idea. We're just going to chill for a second because it is like literally fluctuating between red and green constantly. Well, the problem, Toad, is it's red bar right now. Like it is complete garbage. So it's like, it's not even like, oh, it's a little bit of fluctuation. It's normal, but it's terrible. Like you can see it. My latency is not even fluctuating here. How does it look right now? Can you guys still hear and see me? Like I'm getting like red bar right now. Is it still visible? Like I'm so confused because I almost never see red and low latency. It's really strange. Fine. That's so weird. Like it's at half the bit rate it should be. What the heck? I don't know. Okay, I guess we keep going. I guess we just keep going. Yeah, the upload is just a disaster. So I'm hoping we can get cable, fiber, carbon fable soon in my area, but it's kind of exhausting. It's been honestly years of struggling with this. And yeah, no idea. Okay, well, we'll keep going. Just holler. Let me know if things lag out so that I don't keep yapping to the void. We were asking about Freya. Freya, I would say, is definitely like a 4 verticality, 4 for range. I wish she wasn't so extreme. But I actually think Freya's biggest weakness is breadth. I do not think that she's great with breadth. Does it cut out? Dude, it's freaking killing me, man. The second that I said something... Shoot. Am I here? Are we gone? You've had 0 issues? Interesting. Didn't cut out for me? Is there a time where you want to swap off of Lucio? So Lucio has horrible range, like horrible range. And he's not a huge fan of breadth. So I would say on any map, I think Lucio is pretty flexible if you know how to gap close and take angles and so on. But if you were going to swap off of Lucio, it'd be on any map that has like a 4 range or higher, or 3.5 range or higher. But yeah. Okay. I'm just going to roll. Blizzard World. I'm going to give this one like a 4 range. It's actually pretty brutal, and it's consistently brutal. Actually, honestly, Chad, this might be a 4.5. Like yeah, I'm going to give it a 4.5. I'm going to give it a Havana level grade here. it is very strong for long sightlines. It doesn't mean that you're without options with other characters. There's lots of ways of closing the gap, but there are just endless sightlines upon sightlines. Sightlines are great. In terms of the verticality, this is one of the reasons why it doesn't feel quite as bad as Havana, because I'd give it like a 3. There's some pretty relevant high grounds around here, and high grounds around here, and then maybe even like I might give it like a 3.5. I can maybe give it a 3.5. High grounds here, high grounds here. There's plenty at third point as well. Lots of relevant high grounds. I cut out. No, I didn't. Everything's fine. This is the best. So I'd say like a 3.5 in terms of verticality. So there's long sightlines, but there's also a lot of verticality. And in terms of breadth, first point's not great, but it's not as bad as people think, because this is really good here, like attacking and assaulting from behind here. And then once you get past this crappy choke, you can also utilize angles on this side too, which are really good. Obviously, second point has like breadth for days. The high ground can be very difficult to contest. It's probably my least favorite part of the map. And the breadth options are not as good on third, so I'll give it like a 3, but it's not too shabby. So, and this is why Blizzard World isn't seen as like a Havana or Junkertown, at least not as bad, because there are more breadth options, or like competitive breadth options and competitive verticality options through all the way through. I guess more comparison would be towards a Havana, so that there are more heroes that can feel doable. Yeah. The only hero with movement abilities isn't good at moving. How is that not a design failure? I mean, I don't disagree. How's Blizzard for Diva? So the long sightlines kind of suck, but there's so much, like having like a 3.5 high ground score means that Diva's probably never going to be bad. Yeah, so like Diva's very good with verticality because she can go up and down so frequently with her low booster cooldown. So yeah, Diva's fine. Diva's fine here. Chat, I can't. Are you sure the stream looks good? Like, I'm literally sitting at red bar half bit rate right now. Like, I don't think I've ever seen it do this before. I mean, it's cut out and come back, but I have never seen it sit at red bar. Like, never. I've never seen this before. That is bizarre. How can that be good? Like, you guys know what I'm talking about. If you ever stream an OBS, it's like the red bar and it's like green, like up to your bit rate that you've set. It's literally sitting at red bar, half the bit rate it's supposed to. Bizarre, man. What the frick? I hate technology. I really do hate technology. Like, it just, what's its name? Like, from, is it Harry Potter? Oh, I really hate children. That's like me with the technology, man. Like, I hate it. I hate it. Nothing works as it's supposed to, ever. It always breaks. And I think a lot of it's just because it's mechanical, and I don't think people give the mechanical side of electronics enough credit for how things just break. But I've never seen it do that before. Never. I really do hate technology. I do. I have issues with OBS. I have issues with the internet. I've had years of issues with Vegas and nothing ever fixed it. Okay. And now we're green. Now we're not green. Now we're going back. I'm going to stop paying attention to it. Okay, Eichenwalde. I'm going to give this one like a 3. I'm going to give this one a 3 with range. Now you're like, oh, no, it's way better for hit scan. Maybe because, yeah, but here, bear me out. Eichenwalde, yeah, I'm going to give it a 3. I'm going to give it a 3 for range. What's the point of a rubber ducky? Okay. The sightlines are decent. It's definitely kind of front loaded on second, but there's plenty of opportunities to gap close on first and third, so it's okay. It's fine. It's good. Verticality, overrated. Like I actually think verticality in this map is overrated. It's good to get you out of like the hole here, for sure. Like, like it's very nice to have some sort of verticality to get here. Like, it's a huge hurdle here. But once you do that, okay, what use is your verticality here? It's okay here, and then it's just really not good at all on third point, like almost at all. And it's also really not that good on first point outside of that just initial first choke either. So like, this is why this map is hated by a lot of higher level, higher ranked players. It's because you're like, oh, well, snipers aren't that bad here. And then like, yeah, they are bad because you have no way of gap closing on them because the verticality sucks. And then we want to talk about breadth. Breadth is not good in this map on anything but second point, and even second point is very limited. You have an entire left rotation, which is basically impossible to do, and is very linear. Right rotation is great. There's a lot of options here, but again, it still opens up into the void. Third point basically has almost no relevant flanks. Like the flanks are terrible. And first point's also terrible for flanks too. Like everything is kind of comes out of the same choke. It's just a terrible map. It's just a terrible map. So I'll give it like a 2.5 maybe on breadth, and I'm being generous. Verticality is like a 2.5, and again, I'm being generous. Very front loaded, and so it's just everything kind of sucks on Ike. Now I will highlight, very important to note that sightlines feel better here. Third point, smaller, compressed, brawly characters are going to feel better on third point. No flanks needed, no verticality needed, just turn brain off and spam. Brawl, smash, May, Reaper, speed boost, Junkrat, etc. And to a lesser extent, that's kind of also true here as well. Terrible map, unrelated to the map voting thing. But if you're a hit scan, you will like this map better than some of the other alternatives. And if you do get to third point, Junkrat, Reapers, and so on are going to feast. It's red barring again. I give up. I want to blame the weather because that would give me a little peace of mind, but I'm scared, guys. I don't know if it's the weather. There's this deep existential fear that it's just always going to be a problem. Sorry to interrupt your advice. Nice, mate. I'm glad to hear it. Of course. Cheers, Wish. Because is Freya good third point? Because spam and small sightlines. Well, that's the thing with Freya. Freya's not that great at spam damage. She's okay. She's better than some range characters, but she's not that good. Freya, it's more about the ability to target spam on verticality angles or sideways angles. Because if you're talking about just raw damage in a tunnel, you'd rather Junkrat. You'd rather heck a Bastion turret form. You know what I'm saying? Or a Torbjorn or even a Hanzo sometimes, right? So just don't get baited by bolt spam, as in I can just spam down a choke and AFK. Freya is relying off of the verticality to actually have that spam be relevant. What makes it bad? Objectively bad or good? I don't think there's as completely objective measures, but for me, I've always liked maps that have different compositions that are better on different points, but never that you have to play a certain couple of characters. So I like having, I think more so than even hero design, where I can understand having sharps can be attractive. I don't think maps should be very sharp. I think maps should be mostly hills and valleys, but no Everests or Marianas Trench, because there's nothing that feels worse than playing a character and seeing I literally don't have a choice with what I can do. I would rather have sharper hero designs and more creative visual ups and downs, more options with maps. I think you see this even in other games, maybe I'm wrong, where maps generally kind of follow a pattern, and there's not as much crazy differences in the maps, Yeah. Okay. Hollywood sightlines 3.5 again. Really, I mean, really not bad. Sightlines are really good in second. They're simple on first, but they're really good. And then third point as well can be very strong. So again, escort hybrid, poke is king. Range is really strong. Verticality, I'll give it a 3. It's definitely better than Ike because having high grounds here, and then obviously all of second point are great. But I think third point can be a bit overrated. There are options, but the problem with a lot of the high grounds at certain sections is that the high grounds don't really give you options for certain points. You don't really have anything to impact here with high ground. And most importantly, when you get to here, your high ground is pointless. It just doesn't do anything here. So I would say give it a 3. It's definitely better than Ike, but it's not better. And then I would say for breadth, 3, because I think it's technically better than Ike. There are more choices on second. And then third is pretty terrible, but I guess it's better than Ike. And then first is terrible, but I guess it's better than Ike, right? You can wrap around this way, So it's it could be worse, So yeah, I'm gonna give it a 3.5, 3. You're still not gonna love dive all the way through the map. Brawl is going to have some issues, definitely. Like, Brawl suffers a lot when there's a lot of high ground, a lot of sightlines, and a lot of breadth. And that's why these second points can feel so incredibly bad for characters like Reaper, Ryan, Junkrat, because there's just so much freaking gosh darn space that you cannot get to. You just can't get to. So I guess that's worth highlighting for all the junk players and so on. Second point, Hybrid and Escort can be miserable for short range characters. And yeah, so on. It's still red. I can't. How is the stream still functional? Like, I actually don't even know. I don't know why I'm complaining. I'm just frustrated. Freaking frustrated. Oh, man. We're almost done with freaking Hybrid and Escort. Freya? I mean, it's broader than Ike, which isn't necessarily a good sign. She's fine. It's fine, I guess. Am I dropping packets? Man, I don't know. I have freaking no idea. No idea. I'm dropping frames? No frames are dropped, so it's not a computer issue. I have no freaking idea. Rewatch your VOD? Yeah, no idea. Thank you, Fax. I appreciate the info. It's good to know, at least. All right, King's Row. Bless me. Sightlines. Third is good. First is good. I'll give it a 3. It's decent. It's decent, but the second can be challenging for sure. You can make it work. I think third is really, really quite strong for sightlines, like very strong for sightlines, but not going to be perfect on first and second. It's okay. It's okay. In terms of verticality, quite good. One of the best verticality Escort hybrids, maybe the best. I'm hesitating to give it a 4. I think I want to say like 3.5 because third, the verticality is important, but then also can kind of fall off towards the end. And then first point, the verticality is important, but again, can kind of fall. I don't know, chat. 3.5 or a 4, I'm thinking. I'm not going to really marry to either one, but let's put it this way. You're going to have a much easier time with Genji, Winston, and certain flyer characters on this map than you would on other maps, other Escort hybrids. There's just a lot more options. Yeah, the second point has a lot of flexibility. And third point, there aren't many options, but the options that are fairly relevant. I mean, even if you look at third point here, one of the most underrated verticalities that you can really utilize is this little section right here, like being able to stage up here and drop and control the space. I mean, I rarely see spawn holds here, but if you have the heroes for it, the Genjis, whatever, even the setup, like it is really freaking good here. Hazard, yeah. And then also, like, if you're playing a flanker with verticality or mobility, being able to play here, really freaking good. I do it all the time, both support, DPS, and tank. This little position right here, really good in defense. So I'm gonna give it a 3.5. No, frick you. I'm giving it a 4. It's behind Jibby for sure, but it's underrated. It's underrated. A lot of people think that King's Row is like a brawl map, brawl, but I actually think the verticality gives it a lot more flexibility, and you'll see that in professional matches and even ranked games kind of reflected, where there's actually a lot more compositional flexibility than you might think. In terms of breadth, this is probably King's Row's weakest point. There is options, but those options are really quite bad. Very compressed map. There are lots of angle options for you to take. Those angle options just can feel very compressed. We've talked about this before. Technically, there's an angle option on the side, but there's only one. I think the third point is really bad for generally only having one, and then it flips to the other side. It's like kind of awkward, but they're just very compressed. So I'm going to give it like a 2. Maybe 2.5, just because it's Escort hybrid, so there's generally decent options, but it's definitely one of the weakest. I'll say 2. Definitely one of the more compressed. No, frick, I'm giving it 2.5. I'm giving it 2.5. Just because I gave Ike a 2.5, and Eichenwalde definitely has a huge second point, but it's actually, I think, more compressed in first and third than King's Row is in many ways. So I'll give it a 2.5. I'll give it the same score as Ike. So you're going to have a hard time sometimes with Tracer in this map. You might have a hard time with characters like Wrecking Ball and so on. Not like playing Break here. Yeah, it can be a little awkward. Yeah, Juno feels great here for sure. Yep, Hazard, stuff like that. Ashe can feel good here because she's got that range, but she also has that infrequent verticality, which helps a lot here, and so on. And now we're back to green. Okay, let's keep going here. We're doing great. We're doing just phenomenal here. Midtown. Oh gosh, we have 3 more. I thought we had 2 more. Shoot. Midtown. Sightlines. Straight up, I think it's another 4. Brutal. Really, really nice options on first point. More limited options on second point, but you get to a certain section of the map like here or, here. I mean, it is terrifying to play into a good hit scan. And then third point, I mean, it's insane, no? Like, it's actually insane. Like, the sightlines are insane. You could even argue this is a 4.5, and the only reason I'm dialing it back is because I'm thinking about other variables. So 4 or 4.5, like, it is really, really good for sightlines here. Really good for sightlines. The only thing that prevents it from feeling fully like a Havana are that there are other staging options that Havana doesn't really have. Verticality is not great on this map. I'd say it's like a 2.5, 2. There are verticalities, usually this being the big one right there, and then early third. But I'm actually going to give this one, I think, a 2 because they're just very infrequent, just not very relevant. Like this here, and then this here, and then home on the range. You might as well not even have a jump or a wall climb. It just doesn't matter anymore. It's literally all that. So it's very front-loaded. This verticality is good. Verticality is also good here. And then it's okay here, but it's like very much front-loaded here. You're just not going to feel a lot of good thing. Now, the breadth is better, and I'll give this one like a 3 because this angle isn't great, but it's there. And it's better than some of the other stuff that we've seen on first point on some of the other maps. Same thing with second point. You can go underneath. You can go here. Not great, but it's there. Not great, but it's there, right? You already have more options than many of the other Escort hybrids that we've seen. And obviously that kind of carries through all the way late the second and obviously even early third. There's a lot of space around here that a lot of characters, flankers can really do some silly work with. Sombra can feel really annoying here. Tracer, Ball, and so on can do a lot of really crazy stuff. Soldier. And technically there's stuff that follows through all the way to third point, although it can feel a little bit more naked. So it's kind of that breadth that prevents this map from feeling just a sniper duel because you can run flankers, you can run soldiers, you can DPS Moira or Kiriko, you can Reddit Lucio, you can sneak up on people with Roadhog. Like you just have options to kind of sneak up and wrap around on people that on some of those other sniper maps you just don't really have. And so I think that's kind of like what redeems this map from being unpopular, I think, but definitely not being like loathed by the vast majority of the player base. What would you say is the best support? Climb on with support, whatever support. Whatever one you enjoy playing the most. That's right. I love poke. I love the silent game. Yes, Didact, exactly. Based. Why can't I stand on certain roofs and I'm able to get up there? I feel like I should be able to land up them. Probably like stalling things, but yeah. Yeah, I don't think anybody's favorite map, but also nobody's really least favorite map. We won't talk about map design today, but maybe that's something for another day. Hang in there, Spilo. Self-help talk. Numbani. Now, I think this map's gotten a lot better. A lot better. First point is just so much better, so much less wasted space. Still not going to be anyone's favorite map by any means, but it's a lot better. I'm going to straight up give this one a sightline of 3.5. I think I'm going to give it a 3.5. It can be very good. Sightlines on first are very oppressive. Sightlines on second can also be pretty strong, and third, but not quite as oppressive as Midtown and Havana. It's fine. Verticality, again, it's good. We'll give it maybe a 3. There's lots of ways to use verticality on first point. There's lots of ways to use verticality on second and early third. I think this is one of the more underutilized parts of the map. The reason why it's not higher is that there's a large portion of the map where verticality just isn't very good at all. It doesn't literally almost provides 0 value whatsoever. And then there's also sections of the map like here where verticality doesn't really do anything either. So maybe a 3, maybe a 3.5, but I think I'm going to stay safe with a 3 and say it's a verticality map. It's still going to be a dive-friendly map for those verticality characters, Divas and Winstons, Mercies, and so on. But you are going to have like sections where you don't need the verticality very much, especially later in the game. Now, breadth. This one is definitely going to be one of Numbani's strengths, I think, up until third point, and even then there's some options where there are just more options for longer sightline characters that can open wide. So I'm going to give this one also a 3. So it's not a great map, but there are just more choices, especially nowadays with this entire section being a lot more friendly for attackers. You have all of this crap here. I mean, I think the staircase opens up a lot of opportunities that people probably haven't even considered yet. And then even going left now is a lot more relevant because you actually should just take the staircase to high ground now, where before you couldn't do that. Now, I think it takes a little too long. Maybe it's a little inconvenient, but it is there now. So I think the breadth of this map has also improved a great deal, and I think that's a good thing for map design here. Where it isn't just, okay, their Winston's OP, we lose, or their Widow's OP, we lose. You just have slightly more options with what you can do here. I think this is one of the more dynamic maps because even if first and second can be difficult for brawl tanks, it's definitely one of the more compressed points, and you can function on third point. So, yeah, I don't think it's going to be anyone's favorite map either, but it's better. But it's better. This one, definitely verticality dies after this little first section here, so do keep that in mind. And there are much fewer flank options here. So, I still think people wouldn't love this map. But yeah, Luka Doncic spot in the wild. Yeah, ball players love it. Chat, she doesn't know. Yeah, ball players definitely love Numbani. I think anybody that's ever played Wrecking Ball on Numbani has had an amazing time, right, chat? I can't imagine having anything but a lovely experience playing Wrecking Ball. I mean, I don't think a single character would give you a problem here. Certainly not Cassidy. Okay. Oh, whoops. I didn't know that was a thing. Well, there you go. Paraiso. Now that that's been said, sightlines in this map. Okay, so this is like a great example of what I'm talking about. Whereas I think sightline, hit scan can feel like range DPS can feel really oppressive here, but I actually don't think the sightlines are that good. Like the sightlines are actually kind of awkward and can feel a little bit naked. I'm actually only going to give this a 3 on sightlines. But the reason why it feels more oppressive, before I go down the rabbit hole, is because in terms of verticality here, verticality can be really oppressive and then it's really bad, right? So I'm going to give verticality actually in this map like a 3.5. 3.5, okay, quite good. Right? And then this is the kicker. In terms of breadth, 2. There are some options on third. You can, like, right is a second lane option, and then you can attack from here and here. There are some few options on second. And then technically on first, you can wrap away all the way around to the Mega. But my goodness gracious, this map is secretly just as wind tunnel-y as Circuit Royale. Just as wind tunnel of agony going through the wood chipper as Circuit Royale. Verticality is very high, 3.5. So characters with verticality are going to feel great here. Winston, Doomfist, Diva, Ashe is somebody... Flyers can feel really good here too. Defensive, right? But silence could be a little bit awkward, a little bit naked, a little bit exposed. And those characters that like these broad angles are going to have a really, really, really bad time. Soldier's going to have a bad time here. Trace is going to have a bad time. Ball going to have a bad time. DPS Moiras, Kiriko that somehow doesn't have wall climb bound. I'm going to have a bad time. Going to have a really bad time. Going to have a really, really bad time. So, anything that likes a bit of sightlines and loves verticality is going to like this map. Ashe, Mercy, going to feel great. Doomfist feels really good here. Now some of you might be like, well, wait, Doomfist likes sightlines? Well, he's really fast. So he like Wrecking Ball, he doesn't really care about sightlines. But he also has a much easier time using verticality than Wrecking Ball. The AoE, because it's less broad, Doomfist likes that AoE value. So, yeah. This make you sick to your stomach. I respect that, Dirty Danny. I respect that a lot. But yeah. There just aren't lane options here. There's just no lane options here. It's just almost exclusively 2 lanes and sometimes not even a good second lane. So it's pretty miserable here. Okay. Questions. Again, I'm open to answering grading questions. Not grading, but grading questions, as in like, what would you grade this hero on a verticality? Like, what map should I be looking for with this character, and so on. And then we'll move on to our second to last game mode with only 7 more maps to go. What would you say is Freya's best map? Man, I have no idea, honestly, to be honest with you. Alexa, I would say Ilios can be very good. Just because the verticality and sightlines are just good enough, but I think ruins can be a bit awkward. I'm just thinking about like points. I think Paraiso is actually quite a good Freya map up until third point. I think Jib is fine. Yeah. Hog map. So Hog we didn't really talk about, but because Hog has that like that. I think Hog. Okay. I think Hog unironically prefers slightly broad maps. I think, for example, this is a pretty good Hog map. I think if you put Hog in a wind tunnel versus anything that even remotely considers looks like a counter, it just becomes really challenging. CC, damage, shields, mitigation can be a big problem. Now you're like, but Hog doesn't have mobility. Yeah, but if he can find some sort of cross angle element of surprise burst value, it just he needs a bit of wiggle room. But he also doesn't like a verticality. So he wants a bit of wiggle room, but a bit of breadth. So, yeah. Paraiso, I think Jib is fine. Like you said, Lexa, it might be a little bit more map dependent. But for Hog, it's going to be all of the things that I mentioned, but also environmental kills, which is something we've not mentioned because it is so hero specific. But that is definitely something that matters. So Ilios, which is historically a more compressed map, it's still a decent Hog map because you still have those environmental kill options on basically all three maps. Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree with you, Didact. I would say Sigma is less concerned about the compression because as long as he has a bit of a sightline, he can work down a Brawl tank. Hog can't really. So like you said, he needs those small little flank options. Wuying maps. Wide sightlines. Kind of, I would say Wuying is a little like Soldier 76. Thank you. Little bit like Soldier 76. Where he likes his sightlines and he likes his wide flanks. Now, because he can bend bullets, he's not as reliant on getting super wide flanks. So like Havana first point, right? Soldier in theory should have some nice sightlines, some nice flanks, but you can't quite go wide enough. But Wuying can. Wuying can go just wide enough and then bend his bullets around and freaking kill snipers and crap like that. So Wuying and Soldier, similar kind of things. I think Wuying can function here. Wuying is great in New Queen Street. Probably pretty good on like Esperanca. Anything with a bit of sightlines and a bit of breadth. Any other heroes here? Did I miss anybody? I might have missed a question. Time for the good maps? Wait, is there a hole here? Am I dumb, chat? Am I actually dumb? Have I never looked? Have I never looked in here? Let me in. Huh. Okay, well. Have I just never seen this? Okay. Huh. How many maps left? I can't wait for the Relic Roast. 7? Yeah. So yeah, by the way, let's just remember, in a subtle moment of patting on the back, I don't remember if there was glass here as well. Does anyone remember? But can we just remember the fact that there is actually glass here? Like, just I know it's like the meme, but seriously, just remember there was glass here. Like, there was no point even taking the angle because you couldn't do anything with it. Like, I can't believe that this actually happened. Like, I sometimes wake up at night in a cold sweat and I'm like, there was actually glass here. Like, they actually said, frick this angle, you can do nothing. That's just unbelievable. That's just unreal. Anyway, Colosseo, sight lanes, actually quite good. Give this one even a 3.5. The only reason why I wouldn't grade it higher is there's some fight locations that can be a bit compressed, for sure. But pretty decent sightline map. Most of the push maps are actually fairly flexible for sightline maps. Now, one big disclaimer for push is that because the objective moves so frequently and you have some longer spawns, It can be a game mode that rewards having a bit of mobility, maybe not as much as King of the Hill, maybe not as much as Flashpoint, but having a wee bit of mobility does help. So even though there are more sightlines, it can be nice to have a little bit of speed. Just keep that in mind. Just a little bit of mobility. So just a small thing. So yeah, sightlines, it's like a 3, maybe a 3.5. It's pretty good. It's not great, but I'd say like a 3. Verticality, good when it's good. 2.5. Good when it's good. Very, very good when it's good. And then even stuff like being able to control this space here. But not a necessity at all. Not a necessity at all. Even being able to kind of approach from here can definitely help, but it is not a necessity. You will have good success playing verticality heroes here. But, I mean, basically every hero can kind of function here. And then the third thing is breadth, width. I'm going to give this one a 3.5. Again, lots of wide lanes, lots of wide angles, lots of wide staging ground, and crucially wide staging ground that has the cover so you could actually do things with it, right? You're not just taking these open flanks and then there's nowhere to go. There's enough cover for you to get to point A to point B. So sightlines feel good, but so do flankers. So this one kind of feels like 2.5. I'll give it like a 3 in the sightlines and give it like a 3.5 in the breadth. There's lots of options for pretty much every character here. I don't think there are really any actively bad characters here. Again, those shorter range characters with limited mobility, those old Overwatch 1 relics might struggle here a little bit, but even they have enough options for the most part to where they can kind of function. Yeah, Freya's fine here. I mean, I think Freya, I wouldn't pick this as Freya's best map, though. I wouldn't pick this as Freya's best map. Far from it, I think. Let's keep going. Next up, Esperanca. Sightlines, again, I give it a 3. Maybe even a 3.5. Lots of good sightlines all the way speckled all the way around the map. Lots of options for longer range characters. I think I'm going to give it a 3.5. Might even be better than Colosseo just because the number of areas that you can play as a long range character. And in terms of verticality, 2.5, again, it's literally the same thing as Colosseo. Basically nothing, and then it's something really important, right? 1, 2, 3, and then 4 and 5. These are all very, very, very relevant verticalities that are applicable for characters who can use them, and they're also in good locations that you can use them in. And then in terms of breadth, I might even give this one a 3.5 again. Lots of relevant flank options all the way on either side. Basically, no matter where you take the fight here, there is going to be 2 lanes with health packs with good pathing routes to enemies. Now, that falls off a little bit here, but it's kind of by design because if you open this one up too much, it'd probably be too easy to cap. This is a little bit more compressed towards defenders favored and the same in the opposite side. So I'd say 3.5, you're going to have a lot of options to get around this ball summer and do a lot of silly things. So very similar map scores, I think, between the two. No real major differences in total which heroes are going to feel better. Just very, very small differences, I think. We're moving quickly here because a lot of these maps are actually fairly similar and they follow similar patterns of what I said where they're like, there are definitely some clear good heroes and bad heroes. Well, actually, I don't know. Like there are definitely heroes that do better here than others, but it's a lot more in the between. And I think this is probably the one that feels by far, this and Runasapi are probably the ones that are definitely the most hero strength heavy. In terms of sightlines, again, we're going to have like a 3.5, right? But I think the key difference here is that the verticality is a little bit weaker here. It's nice to have verticality here. It's nice to have verticality here, and it's nice to have verticality here. But it's not a necessity, and it's also not always easy to leverage those positions as often. This is definitely a map where sightlines and breadth matter a little bit more than some of the other maps. Maybe not sightlines, but definitely breadth. Wider lanes, wider angles. Kiriko, Wu Yang, Soldier 76, Tracer, Sombra, Wrecking Ball, and so on are going to feel a little bit better on this map. And then crucially also, as you get towards the end, this is where characters that normally don't always function as well as on push, those spammier short range characters, they can feel really strong here because more so than even the other maps that we looked at, which were definitely defender favored, the angles and lanes on New Queen Street to attack this, the breadth falls off hard. So for breadth, for verticality, we give it a 2.5. Yeah, I'll give it a 2.5. For sightlines, we'll give it a 3. But for breadth, I'm going to actually give it a 2.5. A little bit lower No. I'm going to give it a 3.5 with a big asterisk, okay? As in, Soldier 76, Ball, is incredibly strong here. But it really falls off right around here. It can be a little bit more challenging to find those lanes or angles. Or basically, you need somebody that is extremely strong. So I actually think this one is maybe more breadth pilled, but there are fewer characters that can leverage these flanks because they're so far. You basically need insane speed to be able to use it. It's just incredibly difficult. So yeah, a little bit more breadth pilled on more points maybe than some of the other two. But noticeably, the verticality kind of falls off in terms of value, which can make certain sections of the map feel very difficult to kind of finish through. I talk about the density of health packs. I mean, I guess, like, if we talk about the density of health packs, like, you have, I mean, I don't know, necessarily, like, not really anything comes terribly to mind. That mega is important. This mega is important. Minis here. This mini is definitely important as well, but I mean, not particularly, no. There's mini health packs, sure. But I don't think that necessarily changes too much outside of the breadth of the characters, but not particularly, no. Yeah, so again, like I think like if you get to compare this to the other push maps, I'm gonna prefer characters with a little bit more broad mobility. I think this is an exceptional Ball Soldier 76 map. But I think I'd probably want to play Winston not on this map, or Genji is not necessarily going to be my first choice here compared to some of the other characters. But just by a little bit. It's not a bad map. Okay, last one. And this was also one that I think has a little bit less friendliness. And again, I think it does revolve a little bit around verticality once again. This is actually one of the maps that I think is, personally, I just do not enjoy this map very much. And I think it has to do with the verticality. Because a lot of the verticality is kind of tied into here. And then really tied into here. These are your verticality points. And this is why we'll give it, like, let's say a 2.5. I guess technically you have, like, access to, like, you know, you can go up top here, but it's just not super relevant. So we'll say, honestly, guys, this might be a 2. This one might be even lower than New Queen Street. I think I'm going to give it a 2 for verticality. It definitely feels like a little bit of a step back. And because of that, you're going to see a lot more, quote-unquote, brawl, whatever. Because even if you gauge things from a sightline perspective, like there's a decent amount of verticality on specific points. There's a decent amount of sightlines here on certain points. I might give it a 3 in sightlines again, especially around this section here. And then 3 for sightlines section, really the back half here. There aren't a lot of options for certain characters. A lot of mobile characters are going to have a lot of issues here. Now, breadth, it's still good. I still think this is a 3.5. Sombra, Tracer, Ball are still going to have some options. Like, there's a lot of wide lanes. You can go here. You can go here. Obviously, there's the far flank all the way around this position here. And this does wrap all the way around to high ground, but also all the way around to their spawn. So there are options. So I'll give it like a 3.5. It's fine. You'll do fine with those characters, but the verticality definitely feels a lot worse, which means you're going to see flatter characters. You're going to see more brawl-focused characters. You're going to see characters that kind of want to focus on the front line or focus on little side angles and that aren't going to be taking all these staging grounds or whatever. I don't know why. It's unrelated. I don't know why I've never really clicked with this map personally. It looks great, but just never really clicked with it. So in comparison to, let's say, Esperanca or Colosseo, I think verticality characters are just not going to feel as consistently useful, and those flatter ground-oriented tanks and DPS and supports are going to feel a little bit better. Just a little bit better. But yeah, as I said, to wrap it up, push, speed matters. So anything with a little bit of speed definitely feels a little bit better. Mobility definitely feels a little bit better. And most of the push maps, are definitely more broad-pilled. So not only is the speed valued in the game mode, it's also often valued a little bit more on the maps, even with a map like Runasapi. Okay, questions before we... Again, hero questions before we jump into our last game mode, Flashpoint. My goodness. How do you like Symmetra and push? Symmetra is weird. So Symmetra is like not really super mobility pilled, but she's like the best short range character with mobility. So like I would never prioritize if you're playing like I think Symmetra's fine in push. She has this speed with teleport. And the range is fine as well to where she can function fine. Probably not her best game mode. I would still prefer Symmetra on King of the Hill where you have both the speed and the compression, which is like great for her. But I think she's fine. Breadth, pilled, or angle maxing, as England would say. Best tracer map. I think we're going to get to some of them later. I think some of the King of the Hill maps with better flank options, more broad flank options, without a lot of verticality, and maybe some of the Flashpoint maps can feel really good. Best EDRE map. Well, it has to be Hybrid or Escort. Has to be Hybrid or Escort where she's not required to move around a lot. Has to be like a mid-range sightline. And I think you would have to evaluate what are the maps where you can access high grounds with your outburst. Because her outburst is weird. It's like verticality, but kind of crappy verticality. So any map where you were able to consistently access a handful of sightlines from that verticality, I don't know what that would be off the top of my head, but yeah. Can I rate Bastion? Yeah, sure. Bastion's a bit weird because Bastion's range signatures are really odd. Bastion is more different from other DPS in terms of like his tempo, like his spikes and value around his nade and turret. But I would say in terms of range, like I give him like a 2.5 or a 3, actually closer to the top rather than short range. So maybe even like a 3, 3.5, depending on the situation. Yeah, I think I'm going to go 3 or 3.5 with Bastion. In terms of breadth, like 1.5, like not great. Maybe 2. But 2 is honestly reliant off of your nade reset perk and your heal. So when Bastion gets nade and heal, he can move faster and he's more self-sufficient. So he'll go from like a 1.5, gets nade reset, moves to 2, gets healed, moves to 2.5. You understand what I'm saying? Also, I think you could say his range probably depends on that major perk too. So his range probably jumps up to 3.5 or even 4 once he gets the Lindholm Explosives major. And then in terms of verticality, like 1.5 to nade reset helps with that a lot. Lindholm Explosives technically gives you some verticality too, but definitely his weakest point, I think. Is Kyrie's mobility score depend on the mobility score of your teammates? Funny, Sarah. Technically. Best EDR map has to be Circuit if they don't go Widow. Well, see, that's the problem, Lexa. I think that, like, there's also like something to be said about like EDRE is good on Circuit, but also EDRE is like really bad in tank matchups. So like if you have like a really wind tunnel map and you're just like trading the shooting tank shield the whole time, like I think BAP Zen could be arguably like BAP in a vacuum is probably weaker right now. Like EDRE just overtuned right now, as I'll get out. So is Zen. But I think if you had like all the characters equally balanced, I just don't think EDRE would be better than BAP in that situation. I think BAP Zen would be way better. I think what separates EDRE from BAP Zen is her dueling potential, in which case she needs a little bit of breadth. So EDRE, like BAP Zen are like wind tunnel pilled, but EDRE needs that little bit of breadth. Not the Kiriko Moira level, but just like I need a little bit of side, which is why I think I actually rate Paraiso on defense pretty good for EDRE. Best Torb map. Ooh, range for Torb, 2.5, I think. 2 or 2.5. Breadth, again, 2.5. His turret definitely opens up more angle options. And then verticality is like 0, right? Like just doesn't really want verticality at all. So I would rate Torb with overload speed maybe pretty good on King of the Hill because he doesn't really want to play patty cake with poke heroes. He doesn't really want to play patty cake with Escort Hybrid on most points versus most heroes. So what he would like to do is he'd like to play like King of the Hill, set up on a short compressed angle where he can +1 with his turret and then find something where he can poke out a little bit. I do think Torb is probably best on KOTH from overload speed from spawn. And then the fact that he can actually fight flankers, like fight mobile characters better on compressed angles. But I don't really look at Torb as being a character that's ever gonna like have a great option. It's always like Torb is great until they go better. Like Torb is good versus poke on Escort Hybrid or good versus dive versus Escort Hybrid. But if you play versus poke on Escort Hybrid, you're fricked, right? So Torb is never like the best hero in the best situation. He's kind of like middle. So, okay. Flashpoint. Again, I'm going to keep highlighting this. Speed matters a lot more on this game mode, even more so than push. It's like up there with King of the Hill, where being very mobile from coming out of spawn and rotating to different points matters a lot. Now, the good news for people that don't play mobile characters, it's better than it used to be. They fixed the spawns, they fixed the randomness of the point regeneration, and they also give you a speed boost out of spawn, so it matters a lot less than it used to. A lot less. I remember looking at the win rates before they even adjusted any balance adjustments. I think some of the win rates from some of the slower characters jumped up by like 1.5, 1 to 2% in this game mode just from the spawn changes alone. So that's great news for the flexibility. But that being said, speed still matters here. Now, Aatlis, in terms of range, I'll give this one like a 2, maybe a 2.5, which might surprise some of you guys. I think Aatlis might be the worst range King of the Hill, Flashpoint map, because there are some really good points for range here. I think obviously the obvious answer is like this is like your big sightline ones, right? But a lot of the other ones, especially past first point, just don't really feel like you have good sightlines. So I'm going to give this one like a 2, maybe a 2.5. Not great for range. Maybe a 2.5. I'll give it a 2.5. It's decent. Also, Flashpoint, breadth. Breadth matters a lot. There's almost always multiple lanes. I think every single Flashpoint map is going to have like at least a 3 or maybe even a 3.5 in terms of breadth. I'll think more about it when we get there. So we'll just go ahead and jump to breadth right now. I think Aatlis is definitely on the lower end for the breadth score. It can feel a little bit more congested. So I'll give this one like, let's say, a 3 for range, 2.5 for range. I'm going to give this a 2.5 for range. And then I'm going to give it a 3 for breadth. There's a lot of different ways to approach angles. No, I'm going to give it a 3.5. I'm going to give it a 3.5. I think basically every single Flashpoint map gets at least a 3.5. But it definitely can feel like some of those options aren't the best. Can feel a little bit more compressed. I think this map feels a little bit more disjointed than some of the other ones, and definitely a lot more congested. Which, you know, if your tastes may differ on this map. Verticality, I'm thinking here, 1. I would give this one. You see, the problem with the verticality here is it's kind of a bait. There isn't as much verticality value. I might give this one like a 2. Maybe a 2.5. Not as good verticality as you would think. Maybe like a 2. A lot of the Flashpoint maps aren't great for verticality, and I don't think Aatlis is any exception here. There are moments where you can use it. It just kind of reminds me a little bit of like those Oasis maps, like these little high grounds here. But I don't really think Aatlis is going to be your verticality pilled map. It's going to be this fast, broad characters rather than this fast up characters. So I'll give it like a 2, 2.5. Breadth, definitely like a 3.5. Range, like a 2.5. Characters with speed, characters with mobility, characters with gap closing potential for most of the points are going to feel pretty good here. You got your Reapers, your Vendettas, your Lucios, your Brigittas, your Ramatras, your Zarias, your Wrecking Balls, even to an extent, Tracers, and so on are just going to feel pretty good. Okay. I think compared to the other Flashpoints, I think Aatlis has the more compressed sightline. Like there's less range on Aatlis than there are on New Junk City and Suravasa, which means that your range characters may struggle just to find consistent sightlines. And then in terms of sightlines, I think New Junk City is a small upgrade. I think I'd give New Junk City 2.5 or 3 in terms of sightlines. It's not a great map for hit scan, but if you can get set up, you have like really good sightlines. So actually, yeah, I think definitely a 3 on this map, maybe even a 3.5. In terms of your, I mean, this is not the best point for it, but they are there. I mean, even here, you can rotate in this angle here. Verticality, again, it's just not great. I'm trying to think like off the top of my head here. Is there any reason why I would not give this a 2? I mean, this side is definitely more verticality pilled. You could definitely play games around here. And then obviously this one is probably your best verticality point. There's like lots of points here. I'm struggling to give it anything more than a 2, y'all. I really don't think verticality matters as much here. So I'm going to give it a 2. Maybe you could argue a 2.5. The only difference here is like a little bit more of the range. And then in terms of breadth, I think it's going to be about the same, about 3.5. There are wide options. There's lots of those wide options. That's just basically Flashpoint in a nutshell. It's like just one big circle of points, right? And there's basically always a way to flank around or rotate around. So you're going to notice a consistent theme here that a lot of Flashpoint maps feel somewhat similar, and it's all about speed. It's all about gap closing. The difference with this one and the previous one is there are more opportunities if you can set up to find pretty nasty sight lines and get some hit scan damage done. Like this is one of the great positions in the game for hit scan. Okay, last one here. Thank goodness. Suravasa. And Suravasa, I think, continues that trend where you do have sightline options on many of the points. I think first point is probably your best point for sightlines. Like, there are a lot of sightlines, especially if you're not just fighting in the same space here. There are plenty of sightline options. The verticality in this map is okay. Again, I'm going to probably give it like a 2. That verticality is okay around point. It's decent. This verticality is also pretty good. There's nothing really on this point here. The other 2 points as well don't really have super relevant verticality. So again, I'm going to give it like a 2. But in terms of sightlines, I think this is definitely a contender for 3, maybe even a 3.5. This point over here, not so good. This point's pretty good. This point's pretty good. These points are over here, okay. So, actually, I'm going to give it a 3. I'm going to give it a 3. But in terms of breadth, this map has so much. I would give this one probably a 4. Maybe the most broad opportunity, wide open, so many different ways to attack a point. And you come here and you're like, well, let's attack here. Okay, no, wait, I'm going to attack, here. Attack. Oh, wait, no, actually, I'm going to attack here. Oh, wait, no, actually, I'm just going to keep deepening and wrap all. Oh, wait, no, actually, I'm going to go here. Like, there's literally a door for every, like, there's like 12 spokes on the rotation. And so, if you're flanking or you're taking these side angles as a Moira or DPS or tank, like, there are just limitless choices of how you want to approach this, and a lot of cover for it too. And the same thing really applies to most of the points here. There's so many ways of approaching this point. This one's probably the most limited one, but even here, you still have options to assault from here. You can wrap all the way around behind here. And like I said, this is probably the weakest of all of them. So there's just generally, I'll give it like a 4 in terms of breadth. If you have some form of mobility or speed, you could basically approach the fight from like any angle that you want. And so, like, this is kind of the weird dynamism of Flashpoint, where like the sightlines on this map are pretty decent, but like you're going to be dealing with people all over the place. And this is why a lot of lower ranks don't like this map, is that breadth gives them a lot of problems because they don't really know where the threats are coming from. So this is why people are going to have very mixed. I love this map personally. I really enjoy playing this map, especially as a support player, because I like I like dueling and fighting people. That's definitely a mindset shift for a lot of low and mid rank players. But if that's not your mindset, if you don't like that type of game, this map will throw a lot of variables at you, a lot of threats from a lot of different directions. And if you're not equipped to deal with that, or you don't enjoy that, then there's nothing wrong with not liking this map. Right, so I think like this is kind of like the challenge here. There's a lot of room for creativity. There's a lot of flexibility with what comps that you can run. You can even run, because it's so broad, you can even run characters like Winston who aren't necessarily the happiest without high ground, but there's enough staging opportunity for Winston and so on to work. Roadhog can work here, Torb can work here, Widow can even occasionally work here better than some of the other King of the Hill game mode, some of the other King of the Hill maps. Tracer, Sombra. Basically, there isn't really a bad character. It's just that all the slower characters are going to have a slight debuff, but there's still enough to make it work if you can figure it out. So I would say this is probably one of my favorite maps. I think maybe up there with like Esperanca, maybe Colosseo. Those are some of my favorites as well. Yeah, lots of maps we looked at, lots of grading. Does anyone guys have any final questions? I know we went on and on and on and on, but I hope that you guys feel a little bit better equipped with what map voting should look like for your character, based off of the grades that we've given all these maps, based off of your understanding of your character, giving you some guidance about like, okay, if this, Paraiso, Lijiang Tower comes up, and Oasis, like you have very strong differences between what you're going to play. Like, you go on Oasis, you better have some form of speed, and you're not going to really do a whole lot with verticality as much. But if you got a lot of verticality, Paraiso feels great. If you got a lot of range, Paraiso feels great. You've got a lot of compressed fight options, either Oasis or Lijiang Tower. But then you got to worry about the fact that Lijiang Tower has those wide, broad opportunities. Yeah, give me real quick 1 second, Varashi. Watch the video. Okay, any questions? And somehow my internet is back to normal here. I don't know how. Really good with our baller Winston this map. It's okay. Like, it's a fine Winston map. Yep. I think you're going to have a lot of success on like first point if you know how to rotate. But I think the problem with this map is that so many people fight with ranged characters on this side of the map. You know, it's like if you're playing with ranged characters, like if you have like you could just go out the other spawn door and be here and like all of a sudden we're cooking, you know? Even if your tank isn't with you, it doesn't matter. Big Kale. Yeah, Big Kale is after me, man. That's a shout out. I forgot about Big Kale. They didn't forget about me though. Is there a hero that's good in every map? Mobility is just generally a lot more flexible than other things. So like I think Genji is almost never bad. I think Tracer is very rarely bad. I think Diva, Doomfist, very rarely bad. And Kiriko, very rarely bad. But yeah, I don't think there's any character that's optimal. I think that you're going to have characters that have a little bit of range, a little bit of mobility, especially a little bit of verticality to throw in there on those more sniper-oriented maps. I would say just Kiriko, a Diva, Doomfist. I think Doomfist is probably the most flexible, or Diva or Doomfist, but obviously they're a little bit more matchup dependent. Which map would you completely remove if you could pick one? Paraiso or Shambali. Legitimately hate playing those maps. Best Tracer maps, probably Flashpoint, maybe some of the push maps that we talked about. Reinhardt is more flexible than people give him credit for, yes. Yes, he's more flexible than some of the other Brawl tanks, but the problem with Reinhardt is that I honestly feel like I probably should have done Misunderstood Heroes with Reinhardt because but then I was like, oh, but LH Cloudy, like, I think people have kind of gotten it. But honestly, still watching, like, I hope Chris doesn't see this, but like watching Chris even play Ryan in some of these like Havana maps or whatever versus like these heavy spam poke. And I'm like, yeah, people really do not utilize angles as much of that tank at all. And I'm like, man, if you're playing versus Orisa, Ram, heavy CC, heavy damage, you have to flank. And you can. Like, it's there. Worst Ashe maps, probably King of the Hill on any map or game. Because if you look at like Flashpoint and Push, movement matters, but pretty consistently you're getting like 3 or higher range scores. But you could roll out in like Oasis University, and you're gonna have a hard time. Like some King of the Hills are not gonna allow you to. You don't have speed, you don't have all the verticality, and you may not have the sightlines either. I think Ashe can feel a little bit bad in King of the Hill. I think Shambali it's less to do with the number grading because I don't mind other ranged maps as much. It's more to do with Shambali. Like I think map design isn't always correlated with the rating of like what number should we have here. Shambali just has a lot of chokes that are really poorly designed and that the space and angle opportunities for attack feel really bad. I could do the same thing that I did with Paraiso with Shambali and explain to you detail by detail why it's a poorly designed map. But I won't do that today. We'll do it maybe at some point. Yeah, I agree with you, Dono, maybe. I think my argument is I think map flexibility should be less so than hero flexibility because I think it's good for every hero and every map to have at least an option, right? That's kind of my argument. But I agree. I think that having some, like, I think, for example, like, I think having some flexibility, like, okay, this is a slightly better sniper map. Colosseo is even better for snipers. But then New Queen Street's better for broad. But then, you know, I think, like, some variety is good. But I think, like, I would target the extreme outliers a little bit more than they have. But yeah, it's a great question. I just look at like map design, and if map design heavily favors a particular play type or range or whatever, then I don't feel like anybody gets any particular satisfaction out of that completely. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, I get more satisfaction out of Junkrat doing Junkrat things on whatever map than, oh, I'm just winning because of the map. That feels kind of like some, it's like playing 2CP. It's like, it's great to play defense, terrible to play offense. And I think like that's kind of like where I think you got to find more of a middle ground.